When nature strikes back, the Yosemite bear attack. The morning of July 20th, 2025, dawned crisp and clear over the granite peaks of Yosemite National Park. The kind of pristine wilderness morning that reminded people why they chose to work in America's most spectacular natural cathedral. At 6,847 feet above sea level, the air carried that thin, clean quality that filled lungs with something approaching pure oxygen, and the silence held a weight that urban dwellers never experienced. This was the silence of millennia, broken only by the distant call of a Steller's jay and the whisper of wind through towering ponderosa pines. Megan Elizabeth Lawson stood at the edge of what would become Campsite 7B in the Wawona area, her breath forming small clouds in the 40-degree air as she surveyed the location that had been selected for the Pine Ridge Summer Camp's pre-season staff preparation. At 28, Megan had already spent 6 summers working with children in wilderness settings, but this would be her first year as head counselor at Pine Ridge, a prestigious camp that had operated in various locations throughout California's national parks for over 30 years. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her experienced hands moved efficiently as she checked items off her laminated preparation list. The campsite stretched across a natural clearing approximately 200 yards in diameter, surrounded by a mixed forest of sugar pine, white fir, and incense cedar. To the north, the South Fork of the Merced River ran approximately 300 yards away, its gentle murmur audible in the stillness. To the south, the land rose gradually toward a series of granite outcroppings that marked the beginning of the true Sierra Nevada wilderness. The Forest Service had designated this area for group camping precisely because of its relative isolation from the main tourist corridors, while still maintaining road access for supply vehicles. Megan, the Weather Service is calling for clear skies through Thursday, called Tyler Jenkins as he approached from the equipment trailer. At 31, Tyler represented the new generation of outdoor educators who combined traditional wilderness skills with modern safety protocols and risk management. His background included a degree in environmental science from UC Davis, wilderness first aid certification, and 3 years as a park ranger in Olympic National Park before transitioning to private outdoor education. His stocky frame and methodical approach made him the natural choice for equipment coordinator and safety officer for the Pine Ridge program. Tyler's checklist included responsibility for the camp's bear safety protocols, a duty he took with utmost seriousness, given that the Yosemite region had recorded 47 bear encounters in the previous year, including 3 incidents that resulted in property damage and 1 that required emergency medical evacuation. The Sierra Nevada black bear population had been steadily increasing since the implementation of improved conservation measures in the 1990s, and bears in the Yosemite ecosystem had demonstrated remarkable intelligence in adapting their foraging behaviors to take advantage of human presence. "That's good news," Megan replied, making a note on her weather log. "Rachel should be arriving with the last group of counselors around 10:30. Once everyone's here, we can start the full safety briefing and begin setting up the permanent structures." Rachel Marie Moore had driven up from Los Angeles before dawn, her Toyota 4Runner loaded with specialized camping equipment and trailing a small utility trailer containing the camp's mobile kitchen unit. At 26, Rachel brought a unique perspective to the Pine Ridge staff, having grown up in suburban Orange County before discovering her passion for outdoor education during college. Her journey from shopping malls to wilderness leadership had been deliberate and thorough, including completing the National Outdoor Leadership School's intensive wilderness instructor course and spending 2 seasons guiding backpacking trips for troubled teens through the Arizona desert. As Rachel navigated the winding mountain roads through the town of Wawona, she reflected on the comprehensive preparation that had brought her to this moment. The Pine Ridge Summer Camp program was considered one of the most prestigious outdoor education opportunities on the West Coast, with a selective application process and a tuition structure that reflected the program's commitment to maintaining small group sizes and high counselor-to-camper ratios. The pre-season staff training period was designed to ensure that every counselor understood not only the camp's educational philosophy, but also possessed the practical skills necessary to keep children safe in an environment where nature's dangers were real and immediate. The other counselors who would complete the Pine Ridge team for the 2025 season represented a carefully selected group of outdoor professionals and educators. James Morrison, 29, had spent 4 years as a wilderness therapy guide in Utah and brought expertise in crisis intervention and group dynamics. Sarah Chen, 24, was pursuing her master's degree in environmental education and had completed extensive training in leave no trace principles and wilderness conservation. David Rodriguez, 32, served as the camp's climbing instructor and held certifications from the American Mountain Guides Association. Lisa Peterson, 27, specialized in natural history education and wildlife observation techniques. Additionally, the support staff included Mark Thompson, 34, who managed the camp's logistics and supply chain, and Jennifer Walsh, 29, who served as the camp's nurse and held emergency medical technician certification. The entire team had been required to complete 40 hours of pre-season training, including modules on wilderness first aid, risk management, child development, and the specific environmental hazards of the Sierra Nevada ecosystem. By 8:15 a.m., Tyler had completed his initial survey of the campsite's natural features and had begun marking locations for the primary activity areas. The camp's layout followed established principles of outdoor program design, with sleeping areas positioned uphill and upwind from cooking areas, latrine facilities located at least 200 feet from any water source, and emergency evacuation routes clearly identified and marked. The bear safety protocols required special attention to the positioning of food storage areas, with all edible items to be secured in approved bear canisters and positioned at least 100 yards from sleeping areas. "Tyler, I want to walk the perimeter with you before the others arrive," Megan called from near the equipment trailer. "I want to double-check our sightlines and make sure we haven't missed any natural travel corridors that might concentrate wildlife movement." The perimeter survey represented one of the most critical aspects of campsite security in bear country. Bears, particularly adult males during the summer feeding season, follow predictable patterns of movement that are influenced by topography, water sources, and the availability of natural food sources. The experienced outdoor educator understands that bears are not randomly wandering through the forest, but are following ancient pathways that have been established over generations of successful foraging. As they walked the northeastern boundary of the campsite, Tyler pointed out several clusters of bear sign that had been overlooked during the initial site survey. Fresh scat, approximately 3 days old, based on moisture content and insect activity, indicated that at least one adult bear had passed through the area recently. The scat contained primarily vegetable matter, including partially digested manzanita berries and the fibrous remains of various grasses, which suggested that the bear was following normal foraging patterns and had not been feeding on human food sources. "This looks like a solitary adult, probably a male based on the size of the scat," Tyler observed, photographing the sign for the camp's wildlife log. "The travel pattern suggests he's moving between the river and the higher elevation feeding areas. We'll want to make sure our food storage is positioned to avoid intersecting with this corridor." Megan nodded, making notes on her waterproof field notebook. Her experience in wilderness education had taught her that successful coexistence with wildlife required understanding and respecting natural behaviors, rather than attempting to exclude or control animal movement. The goal was to minimize the likelihood of encounters while ensuring that any encounters that did occur would not result in habituation or food conditioning that might create long-term problems for both bears and humans. At 9:45 a.m., the sound of vehicles approaching on the access road announced the arrival of the remaining staff members. Rachel's forerunner appeared first, followed by James Morrison in a well-worn Jeep Cherokee, and Sarah Chen driving a compact Honda that looked distinctly out of place in the wilderness setting. The convoy pulled into the designated parking area, a flat section of ground approximately 50 yards from the main campsite that had been selected to minimize visual and noise impact on the natural environment. "Welcome to paradise," Rachel called out as she stepped from her vehicle, stretching muscles that had been compressed during the 3-hour drive from Los Angeles. Her first impression of the campsite confirmed the positive reports she had received from previous Pine Ridge staff members. The location offered the perfect combination of accessibility and wilderness immersion, with enough natural features to support a full range of outdoor education activities while maintaining the logistical feasibility necessary for a program serving 24 children, ranging in age from 10 to 16. The group spent the next hour unloading equipment and conducting informal introductions, a process that revealed the impressive depth of experience and training represented by the Pine Ridge staff. David Rodriguez had recently returned from a climbing expedition in Patagonia and brought stories of technical rescues and extreme weather survival. Lisa Peterson had completed her master's thesis on the ecological impacts of recreational activity in protected wilderness areas and possessed encyclopedic knowledge of Sierra Nevada flora and fauna. Before we begin setting up camp, I want everyone to participate in a comprehensive safety briefing, Megan announced, gathering the group in a circle near the center of the campsite. We're going to cover everything from basic wilderness protocols to specific emergency procedures, and I want to make sure everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. The safety briefing began with a review of the camp's emergency communication procedures. The campsite was equipped with a satellite communication device that provided reliable contact with emergency services, even in areas where cellular coverage was unavailable. Additionally, each counselor carried a GPS-enabled personal locator beacon that could summon rescue services in the event of separation from the main group or serious medical emergency. The reality is that we're operating in an environment where the consequences of poor judgment or inadequate preparation can be severe, Tyler explained, displaying a detailed topographical map of the surrounding area. The nearest hospital with trauma capabilities is in Fresno, approximately 90 minutes by ambulance from our location. The nearest emergency medical services are based in Wawona, about 25 minutes away, but their response capability is limited to basic life support and patient transport. The bear safety discussion occupied nearly 30 minutes of the briefing, reflecting both the statistical likelihood of bear encounters and the potential severity of negative outcomes. The Sierra Nevada black bear population had demonstrated increasing boldness in approaching human camps, particularly during drought years when natural food sources were limited. The previous summer had included several incidents in which bears had entered occupied campsites during daylight hours, suggesting that traditional assumptions about bear behavior patterns might no longer be reliable. The key to bear safety is understanding that we're entering their habitat as temporary visitors, Megan explained, referencing a thick folder of incident reports and research studies. Our goal is to minimize attractants, maintain appropriate distances, and ensure that any encounters result in the bears learning to associate humans with negative experiences rather than food rewards. Jennifer Walsh, the camp nurse, led the discussion of medical emergency procedures, outlining protocols for everything from minor cuts and sprains to severe traumatic injuries that might require helicopter evacuation. Her emergency medical kit included supplies for treating severe bleeding, managing shock, immobilizing fractures, and providing basic airway management until professional emergency medical services could arrive. In this environment, the difference between a minor problem and a life-threatening emergency can be measured in minutes, Jennifer explained. Our response protocols are designed to ensure that we can provide effective initial treatment while simultaneously summoning appropriate emergency services. By 11:30 a.m., the safety briefing had concluded and the staff began the process of establishing the physical infrastructure that would support the Pine Ridge program. The campsite design followed principles that had been refined over decades of outdoor education experience, with distinct zones for sleeping, cooking, education, and recreation. The sleeping area consisted of 8 large canvas wall tents arranged in a semicircle around a central fire ring, with each tent capable of housing 3 staff members or 4 campers. The cooking area represented the most complex aspect of the camp setup, requiring the installation of propane-fueled stoves, food preparation surfaces, and water purification equipment. All food storage followed strict bear country protocols, with everything edible secured in approved bear canisters and positioned at least 100 yards from sleeping areas. The camp's food supply had been carefully planned to minimize odors that might attract wildlife while providing adequate nutrition for active participants in a wilderness setting. "Sarah, I want you to take point on setting up the education station," Megan directed. "We'll need the field guides, identification materials, and basic scientific equipment ready for tomorrow's natural history session." The education station would serve as the intellectual heart of the Pine Ridge program, supporting activities that ranged from wildlife observation and plant identification to geological studies and weather monitoring. Sarah's academic background in environmental science made her uniquely qualified to design hands-on learning experiences that would help children develop both knowledge and appreciation for wilderness ecosystems. As the afternoon progressed, the campsite gradually transformed from a natural clearing into a functional outdoor education facility. The physical work of carrying equipment, setting up tents, and organizing supplies created opportunities for informal team building and the kind of casual conversation that revealed personality traits and working styles. Tyler's methodical approach to equipment organization complemented Rachel's creative problem-solving skills, while James Morrison's experience with group dynamics helped resolve minor conflicts before they could escalate. "The weather forecast looks perfect for the next 4 days," David announced, checking the latest satellite weather data on his GPS device. "High-pressure system, clear skies, overnight lows in the 30s, daytime highs in the low 70s. Basically ideal conditions for outdoor activities." The favorable weather represented a significant advantage for the pre-season preparation period, allowing the staff to focus on program development and team building without the complications introduced by rain, wind, or extreme temperatures. However, the clear skies also meant that nighttime temperatures would drop significantly, requiring careful attention to sleeping systems and cold weather clothing. By 3 p.m., the basic infrastructure was complete, and the staff gathered for their first meal prepared in the new kitchen facility. Rachel had volunteered to coordinate the menu planning for the pre-season period, drawing on her experience with wilderness nutrition and her knowledge of foods that provided adequate energy for active outdoor programs while remaining practical to prepare in-camp conditions. "Tonight's dinner is going to be backcountry gourmet," Rachel announced, displaying the ingredients for what she described as wilderness chicken and dumplings with seasonal vegetables. D. The meal incorporated freeze-dried chicken, fresh vegetables that would be consumed early in the session before they could spoil, and carefully selected spices that would provide flavor without creating excessive food odors that might attract wildlife. The cooking process became an opportunity for informal training in wilderness, food safety, and bear country protocols. Every aspect of food preparation, from initial ingredient storage to final cleanup, followed procedures designed to minimize the likelihood of wildlife encounters. Cooking utensils were cleaned immediately after use, food scraps were collected and secured in bear-proof containers, and all surfaces were sanitized with biodegradable soap. One of the most important lessons we'll teach the kids is that wilderness food safety isn't just about preventing food poisoning, Tyler explained while demonstrating proper cleanup procedures. In bear country, food safety is directly connected to personal safety and wildlife conservation. As evening approached, the staff gathered around the central fire ring for what had become a tradition in outdoor education programs, the Evening Reflections Circle. The practice provided an opportunity for team members to share observations about the day's activities, identify potential problems before they became serious issues, and build the kind of communication patterns that would be essential when working with children in challenging environments. "I'm impressed with how efficiently we've come together as a team," Megan observed, watching flames dance against the darkening sky. "The campsite feels functional and safe, and I think we've got a good foundation for the program activities." The conversation gradually shifted from logistics and planning to the more personal motivations that had brought each staff member to wilderness education. James Morrison shared his experience working with troubled teenagers and the profound impact that wilderness experiences could have on young people struggling with urban problems. Lisa Peterson described her childhood growing up in rural Montana and her desire to help children from urban environments develop appreciation for natural systems. "For me, this work is about creating opportunities for transformation," David explained, poking at the fire with a long stick. "There's something about the wilderness environment that strips away pretense and helps people discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed." As darkness settled over the campsite, the staff began preparing for their first night in bear country. The evening routine included a final check of all food storage containers, confirmation that no scented items had been left in sleeping areas, and review of the emergency communication procedures that would be followed if wildlife encounters occurred during the night. "Remember that bears are most active during dawn and dusk periods," Tyler reminded the group. "If anyone needs to leave their tent during the night, use your headlamp and make noise to avoid surprising any wildlife that might be in the area." The sleeping arrangements reflected both practical considerations and the need to maintain adequate supervision coverage throughout the night. Megan and Tyler occupied tents on opposite sides of the camp, positioning the most experienced staff members to respond quickly to any emergencies that might arise. Jennifer Walsh's tent was centrally located to provide rapid access to medical supplies, while the other counselors were distributed to ensure that no area of the campsite was left unmonitored. At 10:30 p.m., the fire was carefully extinguished using established leave-no-trace protocols, with all coals thoroughly soaked and the fire ring cleared of any organic material that might continue to smolder. The transition from the communal warmth of the fire to the solitude of individual tents marked the end of the first day of what everyone hoped would be a successful and transformative experience for both staff and the children who would arrive the following week. The night passed quietly, with only the natural sounds of the wilderness interrupting the silence. An occasional owl called from the forest canopy, and the distant murmur of the South Fork provided a subtle background soundtrack. Several staff members reported hearing what sounded like large animals moving through the forest, but these sounds were consistent with the normal activity patterns of deer, elk, and other herbivores that inhabited the area. July 21st dawned clear and cold, with temperatures in the mid-30s and a light frost covering the meadow grass around the campsite. The early morning routine included individual equipment checks, a group breakfast, and a planning session for the day's activities. The schedule called for advanced training in wilderness first aid, practice with emergency communication equipment, and development of specific lesson plans for the various age groups that would participate in the Pine Ridge program. Today, I want everyone to practice the bear encounter protocols until they become automatic responses, Megan announced during the morning briefing. We'll simulate different scenarios and make sure everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. The bear encounter training began with a review of the scientific literature regarding black bear behavior and the most effective strategies for preventing conflicts. Unlike grizzly bears, black bears typically avoid confrontation with humans and will retreat when given adequate space and opportunity. However, bears that have been conditioned to associate humans with food sources may demonstrate increasingly bold behavior that can lead to dangerous encounters. The key is early detection and appropriate response, Tyler explained, setting up a series of practice scenarios. If we see a bear at a distance, our goal is to slowly and calmly increase the distance while making enough noise to ensure that the bear is aware of our presence. We never want to surprise a bear or make it feel cornered. The training exercises included practice with bear spray, a capsaicin-based deterrent that had proven effective in numerous real-world encounters. Each staff member practiced deploying the spray while maintaining proper distance and positioning, and everyone reviewed the limitations and appropriate use protocols for the deterrent. Bear spray is our last line of defense before a physical encounter, Jennifer Walsh explained, but it's only effective at close range, and wind conditions can significantly impact its effectiveness. The goal is always to avoid getting into a situation where bear spray becomes necessary. The afternoon session focused on emergency communication procedures and evacuation protocols. The satellite communication device was tested with actual emergency services, confirming that the system could reliably summon help even in the remote wilderness location. Each staff member practiced using the GPS locator beacons and reviewed the procedures for marking landing zones that could accommodate helicopter evacuation if medical emergencies required rapid transport to trauma centers. In a real emergency, the difference between an effective response and a disaster often comes down to preparation and practice, Mark Thompson explained while demonstrating the satellite phone's emergency features. Everyone needs to know exactly what to do, because stress and adrenaline can interfere with clear thinking. The evening of July 21st included a detailed review of the weather forecast and planning for the following day's activities. The high-pressure system was expected to continue providing clear skies and moderate temperatures, creating ideal conditions for the final day of staff preparation before the children's arrival. The schedule called for a complete dress rehearsal of camp routines, including meal preparation, educational activities, and evening programs. Tomorrow is our last chance to identify and solve any problems with our systems and procedures, Megan reminded the group. I want us to run through everything exactly as we would with the kids here, so we can be confident that everything works properly. The night of July 21st passed without incident, although several staff members reported hearing what sounded like a large animal moving through the forest adjacent to the campsite. The sounds occurred around 2 a.m. and lasted for approximately 15 minutes, suggesting that a bear or other large mammal had passed through the area while investigating potential food sources. July 22nd began with an early morning discovery that confirmed the presence of bears in the immediate vicinity of the campsite. Fresh tracks in the soft earth near the creek crossing indicated that at least one adult black bear had passed through the area during the night, following what appeared to be an established travel route between the river and the higher elevation foraging areas. These tracks are definitely fresh. Probably made within the last few hours, Tyler observed, photographing the clear paw prints in the muddy soil. The size suggests an adult bear, probably in the 200 to 250-pound range based on the track measurements. The discovery prompted an immediate review of the camp's bear safety protocols and a careful inspection of all food storage containers. Everything appeared to be secure, with no evidence that the bear had attempted to investigate the campsite or interact with any human equipment. The tracks suggested that the bear had simply passed through while following its normal travel patterns. "This is actually good news," Megan explained to the assembled staff. "It confirms that our food storage protocols are working properly, and the bear showed no interest in investigating our camp. As long as we maintain these procedures, we should be able to coexist without problems." The morning training session focused on wildlife observation techniques and the educational opportunities presented by sharing habitat with large mammals. Lisa Peterson led a discussion of bear ecology and behavior, emphasizing the important role that apex predators play in maintaining healthy forest ecosystems. "Bears are what ecologists call a keystone species," Lisa explained, displaying field guides and research photographs. "Their foraging behavior helps disperse seeds throughout the forest, and their presence influences the behavior of other wildlife species in ways that maintain ecological balance." The afternoon rehearsal included a complete simulation of camp routines, with staff members alternating between counselor and camper roles to test all systems and procedures. The exercise revealed minor problems with equipment organization and meal timing, but confirmed that the overall program design was sound and functional. "I'm confident that we're ready for the kids," Megan announced after the day's final debriefing session. "Our safety systems are tested and functional, our educational programming is well developed, and we've got a great team that works well together." The evening of July 22nd marked the final night of the pre-season preparation period, with children scheduled to arrive the following afternoon for what would officially become the 2025 Pine Ridge Summer Camp Session. The staff gathered around the fire ring for a celebration dinner and reflection on the intense preparation period that had brought them to this point. "I want to thank everyone for the professionalism and dedication you've shown during these 3 days," Megan said, raising a cup of hot chocolate in a toast. "We've built something special here, and I know the kids are going to have an amazing experience." The conversation around the fire included reminiscences about previous summer camp experiences, discussions of environmental education philosophy, and speculation about the individual children who would arrive the following day. The Pine Ridge program served a diverse group of participants, including scholarship recipients from urban schools and children from affluent families seeking authentic wilderness experiences. "One of the things I love about this work is never knowing exactly what to expect," Rachel observed. "Every group of kids brings its own personality and challenges, and we have to be ready to adapt our approach to meet their needs." As the evening progressed, the conversation gradually shifted from program specifics to broader questions about the role of wilderness education in contemporary society. James Morrison shared his belief that outdoor experiences provided essential opportunities for young people to develop resilience, self-confidence, and environmental awareness that could not be replicated in classroom settings. "There's something irreplaceable about facing real challenges in a natural environment," James explained. "The wilderness doesn't care about your socioeconomic background or your academic achievements. It responds only to preparation, good judgment, and the ability to work effectively with others. The fire was extinguished at 11 p.m., following the same careful protocols that had been observed throughout the preparation period. The staff retired to their tents with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation, knowing that the following day would mark the beginning of what they hoped would be a transformative experience for 24 young people. July 23rd dawned with the same crystal-clear conditions that had characterized the previous 3 days, but the morning routine carried a different energy as the staff prepared for the arrival of their first group of campers. The schedule called for final equipment checks, last-minute preparation of educational materials, and a comprehensive review of emergency procedures before the children arrived at 2 p.m. "Today is going to be controlled chaos," Megan predicted during the morning briefing. 24 kids arriving with all their gear, parents asking questions, everyone getting oriented to camp routines. Our job is to maintain calm and organization while helping everyone feel welcome and safe. The morning preparations included setting up a registration and check-in area, organizing name tags and orientation materials, and conducting final safety inspections of all equipment and facilities. Tyler completed a last inspection of the bear safety protocols, confirming that all food storage containers were properly secured and positioned according to established guidelines. At 1:30 p.m., the first vehicles appeared on the access road, beginning what would become a 2-hour process of welcoming children and families to the Pine Ridge summer camp. The arrival process had been carefully choreographed to minimize confusion and ensure that safety briefings and administrative details were completed efficiently. "Welcome to Pine Ridge," Megan called out as the first families emerged from their vehicles. "We're excited to have you here and can't wait to share some amazing wilderness experiences with you." The check-in process included individual meetings with each family, distribution of detailed safety information, and assignment of children to their respective counselor groups and sleeping arrangements. The camp's small group structure meant that each counselor would be responsible for supervising and mentoring 6 children throughout the week-long program. Among the arriving children was 12-year-old Emma Watson from San Francisco, whose parents had enrolled her in the Pine Ridge program to help her develop confidence and outdoor skills. 10-year-old Marcus Rodriguez from Los Angeles brought extensive camping experience from family trips, but had never participated in a structured wilderness education program. 14-year-old Ashley Chen from Seattle was attending her 3rd summer at Pine Ridge and served as an informal mentor for younger participants. "The diversity of backgrounds and experience levels is exactly what makes this program special," Rachel observed while helping families unload equipment. "The kids learn as much from each other as they do from the formal curriculum." By 4 p.m., all 24 children had arrived and completed the check-in process, and the parents had departed after emotional farewells and final reminders about sunscreen and staying hydrated. The campsite buzzed with the excited energy of young people exploring their new environment and beginning to form friendships with strangers who shared their interest in outdoor adventure. The afternoon orientation session included introductions, a tour of the campsite facilities, and an initial safety briefing adapted for the various age groups represented in the program. The children ranged in age from 10 to 16, requiring careful attention to ensuring that safety information was presented in age-appropriate language while maintaining the seriousness of the wilderness environment. "This is bear country," Tyler explained to the assembled group, displaying photographs of local wildlife and bear sign. "That means we follow special rules about food storage and camp behavior to keep both us and the bears safe. Bears are amazing animals, but they can be dangerous if we don't respect their space and natural behaviors. The bear safety presentation included demonstrations of proper food storage techniques, explanations of why scented items must be kept out of sleeping areas, and practice with making noise while moving through the forest. The children responded with appropriate seriousness, asking thoughtful questions about bear behavior and expressing excitement about the possibility of observing wildlife from safe distances. "Will we see any bears?" asked 10-year-old Marcus, raising his hand enthusiastically. "We might," Tyler replied honestly. "Bears live throughout this area, and it's possible we'll see one from a distance. If that happens, it will be an incredible educational opportunity, but safety will always be our first priority." The evening schedule included the first group meal prepared by the campers under staff supervision, followed by an introductory campfire program designed to build community and establish the camp's educational themes. The meal preparation process provided opportunities for children to practice wilderness cooking skills while reinforcing safety protocols around fire, propane equipment, and food handling. "Cooking together is one of the ways we build teamwork and responsibility," Sarah explained, while supervising a group of children preparing vegetables for the evening stew. "Everyone contributes to the meal, and everyone shares in cleaning up afterward." The campfire program began at 7:30 p.m. with traditional camp songs and storytelling, gradually transitioning to more educational content about the natural history and ecology of the Sierra Nevada region. Lisa Peterson led a session on nocturnal wildlife, teaching the children to identify the calls of various owls and explaining the important ecological roles played by predators in forest ecosystems. "The forest is full of life even after dark," Lisa explained, encouraging the children to listen carefully to the sounds around them. "Every sound tells a story about the animals that share this habitat with us." As full darkness settled over the campsite, the campfire became the focal point for the camp community, providing warmth and light while creating opportunities for informal conversation and relationship building. The staff monitored the group dynamics carefully, identifying children who might need additional encouragement to participate and ensuring that no one felt excluded from the social activities. "This is my favorite part of the day," confided Ashley Chen, the experienced camper who was attending her third Pine Ridge session. "There's something magical about sitting around a fire in the wilderness and feeling connected to nature and to each other." The evening routine included preparation for the first night in the wilderness, with children organizing their sleeping areas and participating in a final safety check to ensure that no scented items remained in the tents. The staff reviewed the procedures for nighttime bathroom visits and emergency communication, emphasizing the importance of never leaving the tent area alone. "If you need to get up during the night, wake up your counselor," Jennifer Walsh reminded the group. "We'll accompany you and make sure you're safe, but the buddy system is absolutely essential in the wilderness." At 9:30 p.m., the fire was carefully extinguished and the children retired to their tents under the supervision of their assigned counselors. The transition from the communal energy of the campfire to the quiet intimacy of small group sleeping areas marked the end of the first day of what everyone hoped would be a memorable and transformative week. The night of July 23rd passed quietly for the first several hours, with only the normal sounds of the wilderness interrupting the peaceful sleep of tired children and staff. The evening temperature dropped to 38 degrees, requiring careful attention to sleeping bag ratings and layered clothing systems. But the clear skies and lack of wind created comfortable conditions for sleeping outdoors. At approximately 2:45 a.m., the tranquil atmosphere was interrupted by sounds that immediately captured the attention of the experienced staff members. Tyler Jenkins, whose tent was positioned on the northeastern perimeter of the campsite, was awakened by what he later described as the distinctive sound of a large animal moving through the forest with deliberate purpose. "I knew immediately that this wasn't a deer or elk," Tyler would later tell investigators. The sound pattern was different, heavier, more methodical, like something large was investigating the area around our camp. Tyler's wilderness experience included numerous encounters with black bears, and he recognized the characteristic sounds associated with a bear's exploratory behavior. The animal appeared to be following the same travel route that had been marked by tracks discovered the previous morning, moving slowly along the creek drainage toward the higher elevation areas where natural food sources were most abundant. Following established protocols, Tyler remained in his tent while listening carefully to track the animal's movement and assess whether it showed any interest in the campsite itself. The sounds continued for approximately 10 minutes, gradually moving away from the camp as the bear followed its natural travel patterns through the forest. At 3:15 a.m., the sounds ceased entirely, suggesting that the bear had moved beyond the immediate vicinity of the campsite. Tyler remained alert for another 30 minutes before concluding that the animal had passed through without investigating the camp's food storage areas or showing any unusual interest in human activity. The incident was recorded in the camp's wildlife log and discussed during the morning staff briefing, but was not considered unusual or concerning given the known presence of bears in the area and the effectiveness of the camp's food storage protocols in preventing attractant odors from spreading through the forest. July 24th began with continued clear weather and the excitement of children beginning their first full day of wilderness programming. The morning schedule included breakfast preparation, camp cleanup, and an introductory hiking session designed to teach basic wilderness travel skills while exploring the natural features of the surrounding area. Today, we're going to practice moving quietly through the forest and observing wildlife sign, David announced during the morning briefing. We'll learn to read the landscape and understand how animals use this habitat. The hiking group consisted of 12 children, accompanied by David Rodriguez, Sarah Chen, and Lisa Peterson, while the remaining children participated in a campsite-based natural history session led by Rachel Moore and Tyler Jenkins. The division allowed for age-appropriate programming while maintaining safe supervision ratios in all activities. The hiking route followed an established trail that extended approximately 2 miles into the wilderness, reaching an elevation gain of 400 feet and providing opportunities to observe diverse plant communities and geological features. The pace was deliberately slow, emphasizing observation and education rather than physical challenge. Look for tracks, scat, and feeding sign, Lisa instructed the children as they moved through a section of dense forest. Animals leave evidence of their presence everywhere, but you have to train your eyes to notice the details. The children quickly developed enthusiasm for tracking and wildlife observation, competing to identify the most animal sign and asking detailed questions about the behavior and ecology of various species. The educational experience was enhanced by the discovery of fresh deer tracks, several varieties of bird nests, and evidence of woodpecker activity in dead snags. Meanwhile, the campsite group focused on learning plant identification and basic ecology concepts through hands-on exploration of the immediate area around their temporary home. Rachel led activities that included creating field guides, measuring tree circumferences, and learning to identify edible and medicinal plants that had been used by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. The forest is like a giant pharmacy and grocery store if you know how to read it, Rachel explained while showing the children how to identify manzanita berries. But it takes knowledge and respect to use these resources safely and sustainably. The morning activities proceeded without incident, with both groups returning to the campsite by 11:30 a.m. for lunch preparation and a rest period during the heat of the day. The children's enthusiasm for wilderness exploration was evident in their animated conversations about their discoveries and their eagerness to share knowledge with friends who had participated in different activities. "I found bear tracks," announced 12-year-old Emma Watson excitedly. "They were huge, and Lisa said they were probably made yesterday morning." The lunch preparation provided another opportunity for children to practice camp skills, while reinforcing safety protocols around food handling and bear country procedures. Every aspect of meal preparation emphasized the importance of minimizing food odors and securing all edible materials immediately after use. The afternoon schedule included free time for journaling and individual exploration within designated areas around the campsite, followed by a group session on wilderness survival skills. The survival skills curriculum covered basic topics appropriate for the age groups represented, including shelter construction, water purification, and signaling for rescue. "The goal isn't to teach you to survive indefinitely in the wilderness," James Morrison explained, while demonstrating basic shelter construction techniques. "The goal is to give you skills and confidence that could help you stay safe if you ever found yourself in an emergency situation." The children worked in small groups to construct debris huts and practice fire-starting techniques using safe methods that minimized environmental impact. The activities were designed to build both practical skills and psychological confidence, while reinforcing the camp's emphasis on safety and environmental responsibility. As afternoon transitioned to evening, the staff began preparations for what had become known as Wilderness Skills Night, a special program that included advanced outdoor skills demonstrations and storytelling about famous wilderness adventures and survival situations. The evening would conclude with a night hike designed to help children overcome fears of darkness while learning about nocturnal ecosystems. "Tonight's program is going to be special," Megan announced during the pre-dinner briefing. "We'll learn about some amazing wilderness adventures and then experience the forest after dark." The dinner preparation proceeded according to established routines, with children rotating through different responsibilities while staff maintained supervision and safety oversight. The meal featured ingredients that had been selected specifically for their nutritional content and their compatibility with wilderness cooking methods. At 6:45 p.m., as the staff and children gathered around the central fire ring for the evening meal, the peaceful atmosphere of the campsite was suddenly interrupted by a commotion from the food storage area located approximately 75 yards to the southwest of the main camp. Tyler Jenkins, who was serving as the evening safety officer, immediately investigated the disturbance while directing other staff members to maintain supervision of the children. "Stay with your groups," Tyler called back to the other counselors as he moved quickly toward the storage area. "I'm going to check on the bear canisters." What Tyler discovered at the food storage area would later be described by investigators as evidence of a determined and unusually bold attempt by a large black bear to access human food sources. 3 of the approved bear canisters had been moved from their original positions, and one showed clear evidence of bite and claw marks where the bear had attempted to breach the container's security mechanisms. "We've got a bear that's very interested in our food," Tyler announced upon returning to the main group. "The canisters held, but this animal is definitely testing our security measures." The discovery prompted an immediate review of bear safety protocols and a decision to modify the evening schedule to minimize potential for human-bear conflicts. The night hike was cancelled, and the children were instructed to remain in the immediate vicinity of the fire ring while staff monitored the surrounding area for signs of continued bear activity. "This is actually a great educational opportunity," Lisa Peterson explained to the children, who were displaying appropriate concern but no panic about the situation. "We're getting to observe bear behavior firsthand, and we can see how effective our safety measures are in preventing conflicts." The evening program continued with bear safety education and discussions of wildlife behavior, but with heightened awareness of the immediate environment and strict adherence to protocols designed to minimize the likelihood of surprise encounters. All staff members maintained constant vigilance while ensuring that the children's wilderness experience remained positive and educational. At 8:30 p.m., as twilight began to settle over the campsite, the evening routine was interrupted again by sounds from the forest that indicated the bear had returned to the area and was conducting a more thorough investigation of potential food sources. The sounds suggested that the animal was moving systematically through the forest adjacent to the campsite, testing various locations for accessible food. "Everyone needs to stay close to the fire and speak in normal voices," Megan instructed the group. "We're going to make sure the bear knows we're here and that this area is occupied by humans." The next 20 minutes represented a textbook example of proper human behavior during a wildlife encounter in bear country. The staff maintained calm leadership while ensuring that all safety protocols were followed precisely. The children responded appropriately to instructions and demonstrated remarkable composure given the excitement and underlying tension of the situation. "I can see him," whispered David Rodriguez, who had positioned himself at the edge of the firelight to monitor the bear's location and behavior. "He's about 50 yards out, moving parallel to the camp. Big male, probably 250 pounds or more." The bear's behavior suggested a high level of intelligence and previous experience with human camps. Rather than approaching directly, the animal was conducting a systematic reconnaissance of the campsite perimeter, apparently testing for weak points in the camp's security measures, while remaining far enough away to avoid direct confrontation with the humans. "He's looking for an easy meal," Tyler observed quietly. "This bear has probably been successful at getting food from other camps, and he's trying to figure out how our setup works." For the next 15 minutes, the bear continued its investigation, while the camp maintained defensive positions around the fire ring. Several times the animal approached within 30 yards of the camp, close enough for the children to observe its impressive size and deliberate movements. Each time the bear approached, the staff responded with coordinated noise-making and movement designed to reinforce the message that humans occupied the area. "This is incredible," whispered Ashley Chen, the experienced camper who was witnessing her first close bear encounter. "He's so much bigger than I expected, and you can see how smart he is." At 9:15 p.m., the bear's behavior pattern changed in a way that immediately captured the attention of the experienced staff members. Instead of continuing its systematic perimeter investigation, the animal began moving directly toward the campsite, with what Tyler later described as purposeful intent. "Everyone move to the center of the camp," Megan commanded with quiet authority. "Stay close together and prepare to make noise." The bear approached to within 20 yards of the fire ring before stopping and rising onto its hind legs to better assess the situation. The animal stood approximately 6 feet tall in this position, presenting an imposing figure that generated appropriate respect from the humans while demonstrating the classic bear behavior of gathering information through enhanced visual and olfactory observation. "Stay calm and don't make any sudden movements," Jennifer Walsh instructed the children. "Bears stand up to get a better look at things, not because they're preparing to attack." For 30 seconds, the bear remained standing while apparently processing the sensory information available from its elevated position. The animal's body language suggested curiosity rather than aggression, but the proximity to the human group created a situation that required careful management to prevent escalation. "He's trying to decide whether we're a threat or an opportunity," Tyler explained in a whisper. "Our job is to convince him that we're neither." The standoff was broken when David Rodriguez, following established protocols for bear encounters, began making noise designed to encourage the bear to retreat while avoiding actions that might be interpreted as aggressive or threatening. David used a camping pot and metal spoon to create loud, rhythmic sounds while simultaneously moving slowly to make himself appear larger and more imposing. "Hey, bear!" David called in a firm, authoritative voice. "This area is occupied. You need to move along." The noise-making strategy proved effective, causing the bear to drop back to all 4 feet and retreat approximately 10 yards before stopping to reassess the situation. The animal's response suggested that it retained healthy respect for humans and was willing to avoid confrontation when faced with clear evidence of human presence and determination. "Keep it up," Megan encouraged David, while positioning herself to support the noise-making effort. If the bear failed to retreat completely, he's responding appropriately to our deterrent efforts. For the next 5 minutes, David continued the noise-making, while the bear gradually retreated into the forest, pausing occasionally to look back at the campsite, but demonstrating clear willingness to avoid conflict with the humans. The encounter concluded with the bear disappearing into the darkness beyond the range of the firelight, apparently returning to its natural travel patterns through the forest. "Outstanding job, everyone," Megan addressed the group after confirming that the bear had departed the immediate area. "That was a perfect example of how to handle a bear encounter safely and appropriately. The successful resolution of the encounter provided an exceptional educational opportunity that reinforced the camp's bear safety curriculum while giving the children first-hand experience with wildlife behavior and proper human response protocols. The children's questions and observations demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the ecological and safety issues involved in sharing habitat with large predators. "Was the bear scared of us?" asked 10-year-old Marcus Rodriguez. "Not scared exactly," Tyler explained, "but bears have learned that humans can be unpredictable and potentially dangerous, so they prefer to avoid confrontations when possible. Our job is to reinforce that learning by acting appropriately when encounters occur." The evening routine was modified to ensure additional safety precautions, given the bear's demonstrated interest in the campsite. All food storage protocols were reviewed and reinforced, with extra attention to eliminating any potential attractants that might encourage the bear to return during the night. "Tonight, we're going to maintain a firewatch rotation," Megan announced. 2 staff members will be awake at all times to monitor for any signs of the bear returning to the area. The firewatch rotation was implemented not because of any immediate danger, but as a precautionary measure designed to ensure early detection if the bear returned during the overnight hours. The presence of alert humans around an active fire would serve as a powerful deterrent to further investigation by the animal. At 10 p.m., the children retired to their tents under careful supervision, with staff members conducting final safety checks to ensure that no scented items remained in sleeping areas. The heightened awareness created by the evening's encounter resulted in exceptional compliance with all safety protocols, as the children had gained first-hand appreciation for the importance of bear country procedures. "This has been the most exciting day of my life," confided Emma Watson as she settled into her sleeping bag. "I never imagined I would see a bear so close, and I feel like I learned so much about how to be safe in the wilderness." The first shift of the fire watch was assumed by Tyler Jenkins and Sarah Chen, who maintained positions that provided clear sightlines to all approaches to the campsite, while remaining close enough to the sleeping areas to respond quickly to any disturbances. The early overnight hours passed quietly, with only the normal sounds of the wilderness interrupting the peaceful sleep of the camp community. At 2:30 a.m., Tyler's attention was drawn to sounds from the southeastern perimeter of the campsite that suggested the bear had returned and was conducting another investigation of potential food sources. The animal's approach was more cautious than the previous evening's encounter, suggesting that it had learned from the earlier confrontation and was attempting to avoid detection while continuing its search for accessible food. "We've got company again," Tyler whispered to Sarah, who immediately moved to confirm the bear's location and assess its behavior patterns. "Same animal, but he's being much more careful this time." The bear's behavior during this second encounter demonstrated remarkable intelligence and adaptability. Instead of approaching the campsite directly, the animal remained in the forest while conducting what appeared to be a systematic search for food sources that might be more vulnerable than the heavily defended camp itself. "He's checking the entire drainage system," Sarah observed, after tracking the bear's movement for 15 minutes. "This animal has definitely learned that food can be found in areas where humans camp, and he's developed sophisticated strategies for finding it." The overnight encounter continued for approximately 45 minutes, with the bear maintaining its investigation while carefully avoiding direct confrontation with the humans. The animal's persistence suggested that it had been successful in obtaining food from human sources in the past, and was reluctant to abandon what it perceived as a potentially profitable foraging opportunity. At 3:15 a.m., the bear's investigation pattern brought it close enough to the campsite for Tyler to observe the animal clearly using night vision equipment. The bear was indeed a large male, probably weighing between 250 and 280 pounds, with the robust build and confident demeanor characteristic of mature males during the summer feeding season. "This is a healthy, well-fed animal," Tyler noted in the wildlife log. "His behavior suggests intelligence and experience with human camps, but no signs of food conditioning or loss of natural wariness." The encounter concluded when the bear apparently detected the presence of alert humans and elected to retreat rather than risk confrontation. The animal's departure was gradual and deliberate, suggesting that it retained appropriate respect for human presence while remaining interested in the potential food opportunities represented by the campsite. The remainder of the night passed without incident, although both Tyler and Sarah reported hearing distant sounds that suggested the bear continued to patrol the general area throughout the early morning hours. The animal's persistent interest in the vicinity created a situation that required careful monitoring and potential modification of camp routines to minimize the likelihood of future encounters. July 25th began with clear skies and temperatures in the low 40s, but the morning routine was overshadowed by the need to assess and respond to the bear's continuing interest in the campsite. The staff gathered for an emergency planning session while the children remained in their tents, unaware of the overnight encounter and the concerns it had generated among the experienced wilderness educators. "We need to make a decision about whether it's safe to continue the program with this bear showing such persistent interest in our camp," Megan began, reviewing the incident reports from the previous evening and overnight hours. "The animal's behavior is still within normal parameters, but the frequency of encounters suggests that we may be dealing with a bear that's developing problematic associations with human camps." The discussion included careful analysis of the bear's behavior patterns, assessment of the camp's defensive measures, and consideration of alternative strategies for managing the situation. The staff's collective experience included numerous previous encounters with bears, but the persistence and apparent intelligence demonstrated by this particular animal represented an unusual challenge. The good news is that the bear has shown appropriate wariness and willingness to retreat when confronted, Tyler observed. The concerning aspect is that he keeps coming back, which suggests that he's either very hungry or has learned to associate camps like ours with food sources. The consultation with park authorities via satellite phone confirmed that the bear's behavior, while concerning, did not yet warrant emergency evacuation or program termination. However, the wildlife management specialists recommended implementing enhanced monitoring and deterrent measures to discourage further investigation by the animal. Continue your program, but maintain heightened vigilance, advised Ranger Patricia Williams of the National Park Service. Document all encounters and implement maximum deterrent measures. If the bear shows any signs of escalating boldness or food conditioning behavior, we'll need to consider relocation options. The enhanced safety measures included expansion of the fire watch rotation to provide 24-hour human presence around active campfires, implementation of additional noise-making during all camp activities, and strict enforcement of expanded perimeter boundaries to increase early warning time for any approaching wildlife. From now on, no one goes anywhere alone, Megan announced during the morning briefing. All activities will be conducted in groups with full staff supervision and will maintain constant communication between all camp locations. The morning schedule was modified to include comprehensive bear safety education for the children, using the previous evening's encounter as a teaching opportunity, while emphasizing the positive aspects of the experience and the effectiveness of proper safety protocols. Last night, we had an amazing wildlife encounter that showed us how smart and adaptable bears can be, Lisa Peterson explained to the assembled children. We also proved that our safety measures work exactly as they're supposed to, keeping both the bears and the humans safe. The children's response to the enhanced safety measures was overwhelmingly positive, with many expressing excitement about the possibility of additional wildlife encounters and appreciation for the learning opportunities provided by close observation of natural animal behavior. "I hope we see the bear again," declared Ashley Chen. "It was the most incredible wildlife experience I've ever had, and I felt completely safe because the counselors knew exactly what to do." The morning activities proceeded according to modified schedules that maintained educational programming, while ensuring that all participants remained within established safety perimeters. The enhanced supervision requirements resulted in smaller group sizes and more intensive staff involvement in all activities, but the educational quality remained high, and the children continued to demonstrate enthusiasm for wilderness learning. The afternoon schedule included advanced wildlife observation training, with particular emphasis on recognizing and interpreting bear sign and behavior patterns. The educational session provided context for the previous evening's encounter, while teaching skills that would help the children become more knowledgeable and safer wilderness users in future outdoor experiences. Understanding wildlife behavior is one of the most important wilderness skills you can develop, David explained, while leading a group to examine tracks and feeding sign. Animals follow predictable patterns, and learning to read those patterns helps us coexist safely with wildlife. As afternoon transitioned to evening, the staff implemented the enhanced fire watch rotation and expanded perimeter monitoring that would characterize camp operations for the remainder of the session. The modified routines required additional effort and vigilance from the staff, but maintained the camp's educational mission while responding appropriately to the evolving wildlife situation. The evening meal preparation proceeded normally, with careful attention to food handling and storage protocols that had proven effective in preventing bear access to human food sources. The children continued to participate fully in camp routines while demonstrating increased awareness of wilderness safety procedures and their importance for successful coexistence with wildlife. At 7 p.m., as the camp community gathered around the fire ring for the evening program, the staff's vigilance was rewarded when David Rodriguez detected the sound of a large animal approaching from the southwestern direction. The early warning provided by enhanced monitoring protocols allowed for immediate implementation of defensive measures before the bear came within sight of the campsite. "Bear approaching from the southwest," David announced quietly to the group. Everyone move to designated positions and prepare for noise-making. The response to the third encounter demonstrated the effectiveness of preparation and practice in managing wildlife situations. The children moved quickly to establish positions, while the staff implemented coordinated noise-making and deterrent activities that successfully discouraged the bear from approaching the campsite directly. "Hey, bear, go away!" the entire group called in unison, creating a volume of noise that conveyed clear evidence of human presence and determination to defend the campsite. The coordinated response represented optimal human behavior for discouraging bear investigation while avoiding actions that might be interpreted as threatening or aggressive. The bear's response to the group deterrent effort was immediate and appropriate, with the animal retreating into the forest without approaching close enough to the campsite to create a direct confrontation. The successful deterrent action lasted less than 5 minutes and concluded with the bear disappearing into the darkness beyond the range of human observation. "Perfect execution," Megan praised the group after confirming that the bear had departed the immediate area. "That's exactly how to handle a bear encounter: early detection, coordinated response, and appropriate follow-up to ensure the animal stays away." The successful resolution of the third encounter provided additional confirmation that the camp's safety protocols were effective and that the bear, while persistent, retained appropriate wariness of humans and willingness to retreat when faced with clear evidence of human presence and defensive determination. The evening program continued with discussions of wildlife behavior and wilderness safety, but with continued monitoring for any signs of the bear's return. The children's questions and observations reflected growing sophistication in their understanding of wildlife ecology and human-animal interactions in wilderness settings. "Is the bear getting braver because he keeps coming back?" asked 12-year-old Emma Watson. "Not necessarily," Tyler explained. "Bears are naturally curious and intelligent animals, and this one is probably trying to understand whether our camp represents a food opportunity or a territorial threat. Our consistent deterrent responses are teaching him that investigating our camp isn't worth the effort." The night of July 25th passed without additional encounters, although the Firewatch rotation reported hearing distant sounds that suggested the bear remained in the general vicinity. The animal's continued presence in the area represented an ongoing management challenge, but the established protocols appeared to be effective in preventing escalation of the situation. July 26th dawned with continued clear weather but increasing concern among the staff about the bear's persistent interest in the campsite. The morning briefing included consultation with park authorities and discussion of potential strategies for concluding the program successfully while maintaining safety for all participants. "We're dealing with a very intelligent animal that's testing our defenses," Megan observed during the staff meeting. "Our safety measures are working, but we need to consider whether the ongoing stress of constant vigilance is affecting the quality of the educational experience." The decision was made to continue the program while implementing maximum deterrent measures designed to convince the bear that the campsite was not worth further investigation. The enhanced deterrent strategy included expanded noise-making during all activities, strategic positioning of staff members to provide early warning of approaching wildlife, and preparation for potential emergency evacuation if the bear's behavior escalated beyond manageable levels. The morning activities proceeded according to modified schedules that maintained educational programming, while ensuring that all participants remained within sight and immediate support of staff members. The children continued to demonstrate enthusiasm for wilderness learning, while showing appropriate awareness of safety procedures and their importance for successful wilderness experiences. "I've learned more about wildlife and wilderness safety in 4 days than I learned in years of reading about it," observed 14-year-old Ashley Chen during the morning reflection session. "There's something about experiencing it firsthand that makes all the information real and meaningful." The afternoon schedule included advanced instruction in wilderness navigation and survival skills, with particular emphasis on emergency procedures and communication protocols. The educational session provided practical skills, while reinforcing the camp's commitment to safety and emergency preparedness. As evening approached, the staff implemented the enhanced monitoring and deterrent protocols that had proven effective in managing previous bear encounters. The heightened vigilance required significant effort and attention from the counselors, but maintained the camp's educational mission while responding appropriately to the ongoing wildlife management challenge. At 6:30 p.m., as the camp community began preparing for the evening meal, the routine was interrupted by Tyler Jenkins' detection of bear sign that indicated the animal had approached much closer to the campsite during the previous night than had been realized at the time. "We've got fresh tracks less than 20 yards from the sleeping area," Tyler announced, after completing a systematic sweep of the camp perimeter. "This bear investigated our camp much more thoroughly last night than we knew." The discovery of close approach tracks prompted an immediate reassessment of the camp's security measures and raised serious questions about whether the bear's behavior was escalating beyond manageable levels. The proximity of the nighttime approach suggested that the animal was becoming increasingly bold despite the consistent deterrent efforts by the camp staff. "This changes the risk assessment significantly," Megan observed, after examining the tracks and surrounding sign. "If the bear is willing to approach the sleeping areas during the night, we're moving into territory where the potential for a surprise encounter becomes much higher." The consultation with park authorities confirmed the staff's assessment that the bear's behavior was approaching the threshold that would require more aggressive intervention measures. The wildlife management specialists recommended immediate implementation of maximum deterrent protocols and preparation for potential program relocation if the situation continued to escalate. "You're dealing with a very intelligent and persistent animal," advised Ranger Williams during the satellite phone consultation. "The behavior pattern suggests a bear that's had success getting food from human sources and is reluctant to abandon what it perceives as a profitable foraging opportunity." The enhanced deterrent measures included round-the-clock fire maintenance, expanded noise-making activities, and strategic deployment of staff members to create maximum human presence throughout the campsite area. The intensive management approach required all available staff resources, but represented the best strategy for discouraging further bear investigation while maintaining program operations. The evening meal preparation proceeded under the enhanced security protocols, with all participants remaining within established perimeter boundaries, while staff members maintained constant vigilance for any signs of approaching wildlife. The modified routines required careful coordination, but maintained the camp's educational mission while responding appropriately to the escalating wildlife situation. At 7:45 p.m., as twilight began to settle over the campsite, the enhanced monitoring protocols detected the bear's approach from a direction that had not been utilized during previous encounters. The animal's use of a new approach route suggested sophisticated understanding of the camp's defensive measures and deliberate adaptation of strategy to avoid detection. "Bear approaching from the northeast," Sarah Chen announced, after detecting movement through the forest approximately 40 yards from the campsite. "This is a different approach pattern than we've seen before." The fourth encounter began with the bear conducting a careful reconnaissance of the campsite from a position that provided excellent observation while remaining concealed within the forest canopy. The animal's behavior suggested that it had learned from previous encounters and was attempting to gather information about the camp's defenses before committing to a direct approach. "He's watching us," David observed after locating the bear's position using binoculars. "This animal has definitely developed sophisticated strategies for investigating human camps." For 15 minutes, the bear remained in its concealed observation position, while the camp maintained defensive readiness. The standoff created a tense atmosphere as both humans and bear assessed the situation and considered their options for proceeding. The encounter escalated when the bear apparently concluded its reconnaissance and began moving directly toward the campsite with what Tyler described as deliberate intent. The animal's approach was methodical and confident, suggesting that it had decided the potential food rewards outweighed the risks associated with human presence. "Everyone to the center of camp," Megan commanded, as the bear emerged from the forest and became clearly visible to all participants. "Prepare for coordinated noise-making and maintain defensive positions." The bear approached to within 15 yards of the fire ring before stopping to assess the human response. The animal's proximity created an extremely tense situation that required careful management to prevent escalation while encouraging the bear to retreat voluntarily. "This is closer than any of the previous encounters," Tyler observed while preparing to implement maximum deterrent measures. "We need to convince this bear that approaching the camp is not worth the effort." The coordinated noise-making response involved all camp participants and created a volume of sound that successfully captured the bear's attention and clearly communicated human presence and determination to defend the campsite. The deterrent effort continued for several minutes while the bear assessed the situation and considered its options. "Stay calm and keep making noise," Jennifer Walsh instructed the children, who were demonstrating remarkable composure despite the proximity and impressive size of the bear. "We're showing the bear that humans are in control of this area." The bear's response to the deterrent efforts was initially ambiguous, with the animal retreating several yards, but maintaining visual contact with the campsite and showing clear reluctance to abandon its investigation. The persistence suggested that the animal remained convinced that food sources might be accessible despite the human defensive measures. "He's not giving up as easily as before," David observed, while maintaining readiness to escalate deterrent measures if necessary. "This bear has definitely developed strong associations between camps like ours and food opportunities." The standoff continued for approximately 10 minutes, with the bear maintaining its position approximately 25 yards from the campsite, while the humans continued coordinated noise-making and defensive positioning. The extended duration of the encounter created increasing concern among the staff about the animal's willingness to retreat voluntarily. The situation reached a critical point when the bear began approaching the campsite again, despite the ongoing deterrent efforts. The animal's behavior suggested that it had concluded the humans represented a manageable obstacle rather than a genuine threat to its investigation of potential food sources. "Deploy bear spray," Megan commanded as the bear approached within 12 yards of the fire ring. "Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures." Tyler Jenkins deployed the first canister of bear spray when the animal approached within 10 yards of the group, creating a cloud of capsaicin-based deterrent that successfully stopped the bear's advance and caused it to retreat approximately 15 yards. The effective use of bear spray represented escalation to the camp's final line of defense before potential physical confrontation. "The spray worked," Tyler announced, as the bear showed clear signs of discomfort and disorientation from the capsaicin exposure. "But we need to be prepared for the possibility that this animal isn't going to retreat voluntarily." The bear's response to the pepper spray was initially positive, with the animal retreating and showing obvious signs of distress from the chemical deterrent. However, after approximately 5 minutes, the bear began approaching the campsite again, suggesting that its motivation to investigate the camp outweighed the temporary discomfort caused by the deterrent. "This is extremely unusual behavior," Tyler observed, as the bear demonstrated willingness to approach despite having been exposed to pepper spray. Most bears retreat immediately after being sprayed and don't return for hours or days. The second approach by the bear, following pepper spray exposure, represented escalation beyond the parameters of normal wildlife encounters and moved the situation into territory that required immediate emergency response. The animal's persistence suggested either extreme hunger or previous conditioning that had taught it to associate human camps with easily accessible food sources. "Implement emergency evacuation procedures," Megan commanded as the bear approached within 8 yards of the group. "Everyone move to the emergency assembly area and prepare for immediate departure." The emergency evacuation procedures had been practiced during the pre-season training period and involved moving all participants to a designated rally point while staff members implemented final deterrent measures and prepared for potential helicopter evacuation if ground transportation was not feasible. "Stay together and move quickly," Sarah Chen instructed the children as the group relocated to the emergency assembly area. "Follow your assigned counselors and wait for further instructions." The evacuation process was interrupted when the bear's behavior escalated beyond investigation and moved into what wildlife experts later classified as predatory stalking behavior. The animal began following the evacuating humans with focused attention and deliberate movement that suggested a fundamental change in its assessment of the situation. "This bear is stalking us," David announced with controlled urgency as he observed the animal's behavior through binoculars. "We need immediate assistance from emergency services." The satellite emergency beacon was activated at 8:23 p.m., transmitting the camp's location and emergency status to rescue coordination centers throughout California. The signal indicated a wildlife emergency requiring immediate response, but the remote location meant that emergency services would require at least 45 minutes to reach the campsite. "Emergency services are responding," Jennifer Walsh announced after confirming communication with rescue coordinators. Estimated arrival time is 45 to 60 minutes, depending on helicopter availability. The period between emergency activation and the arrival of professional assistance represented the most critical phase of the encounter, requiring the camp staff to maintain defensive measures while protecting 24 children from a large predator that had demonstrated persistent interest in human targets. "Deploy additional pepper spray," Tyler instructed as the bear approached within 6 yards of the emergency assembly area. "Maintain maximum noise making and prepare for physical defense if necessary." The second deployment of pepper spray occurred when the bear closed to within 5 yards of the group, creating another cloud of chemical deterrent that temporarily halted the animal's advance. However, the bear's reaction to the second exposure was noticeably less dramatic than its response to the initial spray deployment, suggesting that the animal was adapting to the deterrent or that its motivation was overriding the discomfort caused by the chemical exposure. "The spray isn't stopping him like it should," Tyler observed with growing concern. "This animal is showing extremely unusual persistence despite repeated deterrent measures." The bear's continued approach, despite multiple pepper spray exposures, represented behavior that exceeded the experience of even the most seasoned wilderness professionals among the camp staff. The situation had escalated beyond standard wildlife encounter protocols and moved into territory that required improvised defensive measures to protect human lives. "Form a defensive circle around the children," Megan commanded, as the bear approached within 4 yards of the group. "Prepare to use any available tools as defensive weapons." The defensive formation placed the most experienced staff members in positions to confront the bear while protecting the children in the center of the group. The emergency protocols included use of camping equipment as improvised weapons, but the staff recognized that physical confrontation with a 250-pound predator represented extremely dangerous circumstances for all participants. "Stay calm and follow instructions exactly," Jennifer Walsh told the children, who were demonstrating remarkable composure despite the escalating danger of the situation. "The counselors are trained for this situation and know what to do." The bear's approach continued despite the defensive formation and ongoing deterrent efforts, bringing the animal to within 3 yards of the human group. At this distance, the bear's impressive size and predatory focus created an atmosphere of extreme tension as both humans and animal assessed the situation and prepared for potential confrontation. "This bear has lost its natural fear of humans," Tyler observed, while maintaining readiness to use camping tools as defensive weapons. "We're dealing with an animal that's been conditioned to view humans as sources of food rather than threats to be avoided." The critical moment of the encounter occurred when the bear made physical contact with the outer perimeter of the defensive formation, brushing against David Rodriguez's backpack while apparently investigating potential food sources. The physical contact represented escalation to actual predatory behavior and triggered immediate defensive response from the camp staff. "Bear contact!" David shouted as he used his hiking staff to create distance between the animal and the group. "Deploy all available deterrents." The final phase of the encounter involved coordinated defensive action by all staff members using improvised weapons, remaining pepper spray, and maximum noise-making to drive the bear away from the group. The defensive action continued for approximately 3 minutes before the combined deterrent measures succeeded in convincing the bear to retreat to a safe distance. "The bear is retreating," Sarah announced, as the animal moved approximately 20 yards away from the group. "Maintain defensive positions and continue monitoring." The arrival of emergency services at 9:15 p.m. marked the end of the immediate crisis and the beginning of professional wildlife management intervention. The helicopter response team included park rangers trained in wildlife emergency response and equipment for safely tranquilizing and relocating problem bears. "Everyone is safe," Ranger Williams announced after confirming that no participants had been injured during the encounter. "The bear has been located and will be tranquilized for relocation to a remote area where it won't have access to human food sources." The successful resolution of the emergency validated the effectiveness of the camp's safety protocols and emergency procedures, while providing an unforgettable learning experience about wildlife behavior and human-animal interactions in wilderness settings. The children's response throughout the crisis demonstrated remarkable maturity and courage, while the staff's professional management of the situation prevented what could have been a tragic outcome. "This was an extremely unusual encounter," Ranger Williams explained during the post-incident debriefing. "Bears that show this level of persistence and willingness to approach humans, despite deterrent measures, represent serious public safety concerns and require immediate intervention." The investigation into the bear's behavior revealed that the animal had been previously involved in several campsite investigations in other areas of the park, suggesting that it had developed problematic associations with human food sources over an extended period. The bear's conditioning represented a failure of previous management efforts and highlighted the challenges involved in maintaining appropriate boundaries between humans and wildlife in popular recreation areas. This bear had learned that persistence pays off when investigating human camps, explained wildlife biologist Dr. Jennifer Martinez during the official investigation. Previous experiences had taught the animal that humans often abandon food sources when faced with determined investigation, so it had developed strategies for overcoming typical deterrent measures. The tranquilization and relocation of the bear was completed successfully, with the animal transported to a remote wilderness area approximately 150 miles from any established camping facilities. The relocation process included GPS tagging to monitor the bear's movements and ensure that it did not return to areas with high human activity. Relocation isn't always successful, but this bear's behavior gave us no choice, Dr. Martinez explained. Animals that lose their natural fear of humans represent unacceptable risks to public safety and must be removed from areas where encounters are likely. The Pine Ridge Summer Camp program was concluded immediately following the emergency, with all participants transported to safe locations and reunited with their families. The premature conclusion of the program represented a disappointing end to what had been an exceptional educational experience, but the priority of participant safety made continuation impossible. While we're disappointed that the program had to end early, we're grateful that everyone remained safe and that our emergency procedures worked exactly as designed, Megan reflected during the final staff debriefing. This experience demonstrated both the incredible power of wilderness environments and the importance of thorough preparation and professional emergency response. The psychological impact of the encounter on both children and staff required careful attention during the days and weeks following the emergency. Counseling services were provided to all participants, with particular attention to helping children process the experience in ways that maintained their appreciation for wilderness environments while reinforcing the importance of safety and preparedness. The children showed incredible courage and maturity throughout the crisis, observed Dr. Sarah Thompson, the psychologist who provided post-incident counseling services. The experience, while frightening, provided valuable lessons about human resilience and the importance of teamwork in challenging situations. The media coverage of the incident focused attention on the broader challenges involved in managing human-wildlife interactions in popular recreation areas. The encounter highlighted the need for improved education about wildlife behavior and more aggressive intervention when animals demonstrate problematic conditioning. This incident demonstrates the complex challenges we face in managing wildland recreation areas, explained National Park Service Director Robert Chen during a press conference following the emergency. As human use of wilderness areas increases, we must develop more effective strategies for preventing wildlife conditioning while maintaining public access to these incredible natural resources. The official investigation into the incident resulted in several recommendations for improving wilderness safety protocols and wildlife management procedures. The recommendations included enhanced training for outdoor recreation professionals, improved coordination between emergency services and remote camps, and more aggressive intervention when wildlife demonstrates concerning behavior patterns. The Pine Ridge staff responded professionally throughout this crisis, concluded the official investigation report. Their preparation, training, and emergency procedures prevented what could have been a tragedy and demonstrated the importance of professional leadership in wilderness recreation programs. The long-term impact of the encounter extended beyond the immediate participants to influence wilderness education programs throughout the region. The incident became a case study for professional training programs and contributed to the development of improved protocols for managing wildlife encounters in educational settings. This experience has made all of us better wilderness educators, reflected Tyler Jenkins 6 months after the incident. We've learned valuable lessons about wildlife behavior, emergency preparedness, and the importance of maintaining respect for the power and unpredictability of natural environments. The Pine Ridge Summer Camp program resumed operations the following year with enhanced safety protocols and modified site selection criteria designed to minimize the likelihood of similar encounters. The program's commitment to wilderness education remained unchanged, but the experience had reinforced the importance of balancing educational opportunities with participant safety. Wilderness education involves inherent risks that cannot be completely eliminated, Megan Lawson explained during staff training for the 2026 season. Our responsibility is to manage those risks through careful preparation, professional judgment, and emergency preparedness, while maintaining the transformative power of authentic wilderness experiences. The bear involved in the incident was successfully relocated and monitored for 6 months following the emergency. GPS tracking data indicated that the animal adapted successfully to its new environment and showed no evidence of seeking out human contact or food sources. The successful relocation represented a positive outcome that protected both human safety and wildlife conservation interests. The relocation was ultimately successful, reported Dr. Martinez 1 year after the incident. The bear has established a new territory in a remote area and shows normal foraging behavior without any evidence of continued conditioning to human food sources. The scientific community studied the incident extensively, using the detailed documentation compiled by the Pine Ridge staff to better understand the factors that contribute to problematic wildlife conditioning. The research contributed to improved understanding of bear behavior and more effective management strategies for preventing similar situations. This case provided valuable insights into the complex factors that influence bear behavior around human camps, explained Dr. Robert Williams of the University of California Wildlife Research Center. The detailed documentation allowed us to analyze the decision-making process that led to the bear's persistent behavior and develop better, predictive models for identifying potentially problematic animals. The children who participated in the Pine Ridge program maintained contact with each other and the staff through an alumni network that provided ongoing support and opportunities to process the experience. Many participants reported that the encounter, while frightening, had increased their appreciation for wilderness environments and their confidence in their ability to handle challenging situations. The experience taught me that I'm stronger and braver than I thought I was, reflected Emma Watson 2 years after the incident. It also made me realize how important it is to respect wildlife and understand the environment we're visiting when we go into wild places. The Pine Ridge staff continued their careers in wilderness education with enhanced appreciation for the responsibilities involved in leading others into natural environments. The experience reinforced their commitment to safety and preparedness while maintaining their belief in the transformative power of authentic wilderness experiences. That week in July 2025 changed all of us, reflected Rachel Moore during a staff reunion 3 years after the incident. We learned that wilderness education involves real risks that require professional management, but we also learned that proper preparation and teamwork can overcome even the most challenging situations. The incident became a defining moment in the careers of all involved and contributed to their development as leaders in the field of wilderness education. The experience validated the importance of thorough preparation and professional emergency response while reinforcing the incredible value of authentic wilderness experiences for young people. The Pine Ridge Bear encounter represents both the challenges and the rewards of wilderness education, observed Dr. Jennifer Walsh 5 years after the incident. The experience tested all of our skills and preparation, but it also demonstrated the remarkable resilience and courage that young people can develop when faced with real challenges in natural environments. The legacy of the incident continues to influence wilderness education programs throughout North America, serving as a case study for professional training and a reminder of the importance of maintaining respect for the power and unpredictability of natural environments. The experience reinforced the essential role that professional preparation and emergency response capabilities play in providing safe and transformative wilderness experiences. When nature strikes back, the Yosemite bear attack stands as a testament to the incredible courage and professionalism of wilderness educators who dedicate their careers to helping others discover the transformative power of authentic experiences in natural environments. The incident reminded everyone involved that wilderness education involves real risks that require professional management, but that these risks are manageable when faced with proper preparation, training, and respect for the awesome power of the natural world. The next stories, When the Sky Falls Silent. The morning of February 8th, 2024, dawned with deceptive tranquility across the Kodiak Island archipelago. A thin layer of frost coated the Douglas fir and Sitka spruce that blanketed the mountainous terrain, while the Shelikof Strait reflected the pale winter sun like hammered pewter. At Kodiak Regional Airport, 55-year-old Alan Brooks completed his pre-flight inspection of N847KB, a pristine 1998 Cessna 206 Stationair that represented both his livelihood and his passion. Alan had been flying the Alaskan bush for 23 years, ever since he'd left his job as a commercial airline pilot in Seattle following his divorce. The structured world of scheduled flights and airline regulations had felt suffocating after Margaret took the kids and moved to Portland. Alaska offered something different: freedom, solitude, and the kind of challenges that reminded a man he was alive. His logbook showed over 12,000 hours of flight time, with 8,500 of those accumulated in single-engine aircraft, navigating some of the most unforgiving terrain in North America. Standing 6 feet 2 inches, with weathered hands and steel-grey hair, perpetually mussed by wind and headsets, Alan had earned a reputation among the fishing guides, hunters, and remote homesteaders who depended on his services. He knew every landing strip, every weather pattern, every mountain pass between Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula. His clients trusted him implicitly, and that trust had never been misplaced. Today's flight was routine by his standards, a cargo run to deliver supplies to Dr. Sarah Chen's remote research station on the southern tip of Kodiak Island. Dr. Chen, a 42-year-old wildlife biologist from the University of Alaska Anchorage, had been studying the behavioral patterns of Kodiak bears for the past 3 years. Her work was groundbreaking, documenting how these massive predators, some weighing over 1,500 pounds, adapted their hunting and territorial behaviors in response to climate change and human encroachment. The research station, designated as Base Camp Ursus in official documents, sat in a clearing roughly 15 miles southwest of the village of Old Harbor. It was accessible only by aircraft, boat, or a grueling 2-day hike through terrain that could charitably be described as hostile. The camp consisted of 3 prefabricated structures: a main research building with laboratory equipment and communications gear, a smaller cabin that served as living quarters, and a storage shed for food and equipment. Solar panels and a diesel generator provided power, while a sophisticated radio system maintained contact with the outside world. Dr. Chen's team for the winter season included Dr. Marcus Webb, a 38-year-old behavioral ecologist from Oregon State University, and Jennifer Jen Kowalski, a 26-year-old graduate student from UAA who served as the team's photographer and data analyst. Jen had grown up in Anchorage, the daughter of a commercial fisherman and a high school teacher. Her fascination with wildlife had led her to pursue a master's degree in environmental science, and this assignment represented the culmination of 3 years of academic preparation. Dr. Webb brought a different perspective to the team. A former military intelligence officer who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before returning to academia, he approached bear research with the methodical precision of someone who understood that complacency could be fatal. His role involved analyzing territorial patterns and predator-prey relationships, work that required him to spend long hours in the field tracking bear movements through GPS collar data and direct observation. Alan's cargo manifest for the February 8th flight included 400 pounds of scientific equipment, food supplies for 2 weeks, and several boxes of specialized batteries for the team's monitoring equipment. The weather forecast called for clear skies with light winds, ideal flying conditions that would make the 90-minute round trip straightforward and routine. At 9:15 a.m., Alan taxied N847KB to the runway threshold. The Cessna 206, with its distinctive high-wing configuration and fixed landing gear, was perfectly suited for the short, unpaved airstrips that dotted the Alaskan wilderness. Its 6-cylinder Continental IO 540 engine produced 300 horsepower, enough to carry substantial cargo loads while maintaining the reliability that bush pilots demanded. The takeoff was smooth, and Alan banked southwest over Kodiak's mountainous interior. Below him, the landscape unfolded in a pattern of snow-covered peaks, deep valleys, and countless streams that would rage with salmon during the summer months, but now lay frozen and silent. The flight path took him over Pillar Mountain, past the abandoned World War II bunkers that still dotted the coastline, and along the rugged shoreline where massive waves from the North Pacific crashed against vertical cliffs. As he flew, Alan reflected on the conversation he'd had with Dr. Chen during his previous supply run 2 weeks earlier. She had been excited about recent data indicating unusual bear activity in the area. Several of the collared bears were showing movement patterns that deviated significantly from established behavioral models. Some appeared to be ranging much farther from their traditional territories, while others were exhibiting increased aggression toward perceived threats. "We're seeing behaviors we've never documented before," Dr. Chen had explained while helping unload supplies. "Bears that should be in partial hibernation are actively hunting. Territory boundaries that have been stable for years are suddenly being challenged. Climate change is obviously a factor, but there's something else happening here." Dr. Webb had nodded grimly. "The locals in Old Harbor have been reporting more encounters too. 3 separate incidents in the past month where bears have approached the village. That's unprecedented for this time of year." Alan had filed this information away with the casual attention of someone who had heard similar stories throughout his career. Bears were a constant presence in the Kodiak wilderness, but encounters with humans remained relatively rare. The animals were intelligent enough to avoid areas of human activity, and the vastness of the island provided plenty of space for both species to coexist. At 10:42 a.m., Alan began his descent toward the research station's landing strip. The airfield was little more than a cleared section of relatively flat ground, marked at each end by orange windsocks and maintained through the combined efforts of Dr. Chen's team and periodic visits from state maintenance crews. Landing here required precision and experience. The strip was barely 800 feet long, with trees rising on 3 sides and a steep drop-off to the ocean on the 4th. Alan had made this approach dozens of times, but he never took it for granted. He reduced power and configured the aircraft for landing, extending flaps and adjusting trim as the Cessna descended through 500 feet above ground level. The airspeed indicator showed 75 knots, perfect for the short-field approach that would bring him safely onto the narrow strip. At 200 feet, something went wrong. The Continental engine, which had been running smoothly throughout the flight, suddenly began to run rough. Alan felt the aircraft shudder as the engine lost power, the steady rumble replaced by an irregular coughing that sent ice through his veins. He immediately pushed the throttle forward and switched fuel tanks, standard procedures for addressing engine problems, but the roughness persisted. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," Alan transmitted over the emergency frequency. "This is Cessna 847 Kilo Bravo, experiencing engine failure on approach to Base Camp Ursus, attempting forced landing." The response came immediately from Kodiak Flight Service Station. 847 Kilo Bravo, this is Kodiak Radio. We copy your mayday. What is your current position and souls on board? Kodiak Radio, 847 Kilo Bravo is approximately 2 miles northeast of Base Camp Ursus, with one soul on board. Engine is running very rough, losing altitude. Alan's training and experience took over as the aircraft descended through 100 feet. With the engine producing minimal power, he had limited options. The research station's landing strip was still his best choice, but he was coming in too fast and too high. He would have to stretch the glide and hope the engine provided enough power to reach the threshold. At 50 feet above the trees, the engine quit completely. The sudden silence was deafening. Alan could hear the wind whistling past the windscreen and the sound of his own breathing amplified in the now quiet cockpit. The Cessna was a glider now. And he had perhaps 30 seconds to find a place to put it down. The landing strip was still 400 yards ahead, but without power he wouldn't make it. To his left, a small clearing offered a possible emergency landing site, but it was partially obscured by trees and he couldn't assess the terrain. Straight ahead, the forest stretched unbroken to the coastline. Alan made the decision that would save his life in the short term, but set in motion a chain of events that would terrify him beyond imagination. He banked slightly left toward the clearing, trading airspeed for distance as the aircraft settled toward the treetops. The impact came at 10:44 a.m. N847 KB, struck the tops of several Sitka spruce trees, the aluminum wings shearing off branches and small trunks as the aircraft decelerated rapidly. Alan felt the violent jolting as the landing gear caught in the canopy, spinning the aircraft 90 degrees to the right before it crashed through the upper branches and slammed into the ground. The crash sequence lasted perhaps 4 seconds, but Alan experienced it in the peculiar slow motion that accompanies life-threatening situations. He felt the shoulder harness cutting into his chest as the aircraft pitched forward, saw the instrument panel buckling as the nose collapsed, heard the screaming of metal and the explosive sound of the windscreen shattering. When the motion stopped, Alan found himself hanging upside down in his seat harness, blood running from a cut on his forehead into his hair. The cabin was partially crushed, but the aircraft's robust construction had protected him from serious injury. His legs were bruised, and his left shoulder ached, but he could move all his extremities. Most importantly, he detected no smell of fuel, which meant the crash hadn't ruptured the fuel tanks. "Kodiak Radio, this is 847 Kilo Bravo," he called weakly into his headset, but received no response. The radio had been damaged in the crash, severing his connection to the outside world. Alan carefully released his seatbelt and extracted himself from the wreckage. The aircraft had come to rest in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest, approximately half a mile from the research station. The right wing was completely severed, lying crumpled against a massive spruce tree. The left wing hung at an unnatural angle, its tip buried in the frozen ground. The propeller was bent beyond recognition, and the engine cowling had separated from the fuselage. Despite the destruction, Alan felt a wave of gratitude. He was alive, mobile, and relatively close to help. Dr. Chen's team would have heard the crash and would be organizing a rescue effort. He just needed to signal his location, and wait for assistance. As he stood in the wreckage surveying the damage, Alan became aware of the profound silence that surrounded him. The forest was utterly quiet. No bird calls, no wind in the trees, no distant sounds of human activity. It was the kind of silence that seemed to press against his eardrums, broken only by the occasional crack of settling metal from the cooling aircraft. Alan retrieved his emergency pack from behind the pilot's seat, grateful to find it intact. The pack contained a sleeping bag, emergency food for 3 days, a first aid kit, waterproof matches, and a handheld GPS unit. Most importantly, it included a personal locator beacon, PLB, that would transmit his exact coordinates to search and rescue satellites. He activated the PLB and set it on the aircraft's instrument panel, where it would have the best chance of maintaining satellite contact. The device would transmit a distress signal every few minutes, providing search teams with his precise location. Rescue, he estimated, would arrive within 6 to 8 hours. Alan spent the next 30 minutes creating a more visible signal. He dragged pieces of the aluminum wing into the clearing and arranged them to spell OK in letters 10 feet tall. The reflective metal would be easily spotted from aircraft, and the message would let searchers know he was alive and mobile. By noon, the temperature had risen to nearly 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and Alan was beginning to feel optimistic about his situation. The crash had been terrifying, but he was uninjured and well-equipped for a short wait. Dr. Chen's team was certainly aware of his situation by now, and the clear weather would facilitate air searches. It was while he was gathering firewood for a signal fire that Alan first became aware he was not alone in the forest. The sound was subtle at first, a soft shuffling in the underbrush about 50 yards to his north. Alan paused, listening intently. The shuffling stopped when he stopped moving, resuming when he began collecting wood again. Something was watching him, matching his movements to avoid detection. Alan's experience in the Alaskan wilderness had taught him to trust his instincts, and those instincts were now screaming warnings. He set down the firewood and backed slowly toward the aircraft wreckage, his eyes scanning the tree line for movement. The forest remained still, but the sensation of being observed intensified. Alan reached into his emergency pack and retrieved a canister of bear spray, a concentrated pepper solution that could deter aggressive wildlife from distances up to 30 feet. The familiar weight of the canister in his hand provided some comfort, but he knew that pepper spray was a last resort, not a guarantee of safety. For 20 minutes, Alan waited by the wreckage, watching and listening. The shuffling sounds did not return, and gradually his tension began to ease. The forest was home to numerous animals that might be curious about the crash site. Deer, foxes, even smaller bears that posed no threat to humans. His imagination was probably amplifying normal wildlife activity into something more sinister. At 12:35 p.m., Alan decided to attempt hiking toward the research station. The distance was manageable, and the team would be able to provide shelter and communication equipment while they waited for official rescue teams to arrive. He shouldered his emergency pack, took a final GPS reading to mark the crash site, and set off through the forest. The terrain between the crash site and Base Camp Ursus was challenging but not impossible. Alan navigated by GPS, following a roughly southwestern bearing that should bring him to the research station within 2 hours. The forest floor was covered with a layer of snow that crunched softly under his boots, while overhead the canopy filtered the afternoon sun into shifting patterns of light and shadow. Alan had been hiking for approximately 40 minutes when he found the first track. The print was enormous, over 1 foot long and 8 inches wide, with clearly defined claw marks extending several inches beyond the pad marks. The track was fresh, probably made within the past few hours, and it was heading in the same direction Alan was traveling. Kodiak bears were the largest brown bears in the world, with adult males sometimes exceeding 1,500 pounds and standing over 10 feet tall on their hind legs. They were generally not aggressive toward humans, but they were territorial and unpredictable, especially during the winter months when food sources were scarce. Alan studied the track carefully, his pulse quickening as he absorbed the implications. The bear was large, possibly one of the massive boars that dominated the island's ecosystem, and it was moving toward the research station. More disturbing was the realization that this was probably the source of the sounds he had heard near the crash site. The animal had been watching him, evaluating him, perhaps following him. Standard bear safety protocols called for making noise to avoid surprising the animal. But Alan's situation was complicated by his need to reach the research station quickly. Making himself more conspicuous might deter the bear, but it would also advertise his presence to any other predators in the area. Alan decided to continue toward the research station while remaining hyper-vigilant for signs of the bear. He began speaking aloud as he walked, his voice carrying through the forest to announce his presence. "Just passing through, bear," he said, feeling somewhat foolish but knowing that human voices often deterred wildlife encounters. "No threat here, just trying to get to safety." The next 45 minutes passed without incident, and Alan began to relax slightly. The GPS showed he was within half a mile of the research station, close enough that he should be able to see the clearing where the buildings were located. The bear tracks had veered off to the east, suggesting the animal had lost interest in his movement. At 2:18 p.m., Alan crested a small ridge and saw Base Camp Ursus spread out in the valley below. Something was wrong. The research station was silent and still, with no signs of human activity. No smoke rose from the chimneys, no lights showed in the windows, and the normally meticulously maintained compound appeared abandoned. Most disturbing, the door to the main research building hung open, swaying slightly in the afternoon breeze. Alan descended into the valley with growing unease. As he approached the buildings, he could see signs of disturbance, equipment scattered on the ground, deep gouges in the wooden walls, and what appeared to be claw marks around the doorframe of the main building. "Dr. Chen," he called out. "Dr. Webb." "Jen, is anyone here?" The only response was the echo of his own voice bouncing off the surrounding hills. Alan entered the main research building cautiously, his bear spray ready. The interior had been ransacked. Computer equipment lay smashed on the floor, papers were scattered everywhere, and cabinets had been torn open and their contents strewn about. More ominously, several large holes had been punched through the interior walls, as if something massive had forced its way through the building. The radio equipment that would have provided contact with the outside world had been destroyed, the antenna cable severed, and the radio itself reduced to a pile of electronic components. Alan's hope of calling for help was evaporating as rapidly as his confidence in his safety. The living quarters told a similar story. Personal belongings were scattered throughout the rooms, sleeping bags had been shredded, and the kitchen area showed signs of intensive foraging. Canned goods had been punctured and their contents consumed, while softer food items had simply disappeared. Most disturbing of all was the complete absence of the research team. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no indication of what had happened to Dr. Chen, Dr. Webb, and Jen. It was as if they had simply vanished, leaving behind only the wreckage of their life's work. Alan spent an hour searching the compound and the immediate surrounding area, calling out repeatedly for the missing researchers. His calls went unanswered, and the silence seemed to grow more oppressive with each passing minute. The winter sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon, and Alan realized he needed to make critical decisions about his survival. The research station's generator was still functional, and Alan was able to restore power to the main building. Emergency food supplies remained in the storage shed, enough to sustain him for several days, if necessary. Most importantly, the building provided shelter from the elements and a defensible position should he encounter the bear that had obviously visited the station. As evening approached, Alan began to understand the true nature of his situation. The crash had stranded him in one of the most remote locations in North America. Winter weather was settling in. The research team had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and a massive bear was somewhere in the immediate area. His personal locator beacon was transmitting his location, but search teams would be looking for him at the crash site, not at the research station. At 6:30 p.m., Alan made the decision that would determine whether he lived or died over the next 24 hours. He would remain at the research station overnight, taking advantage of the shelter and power, then return to the crash site in the morning to meet rescue teams. The plan was logical and safe, based on sound wilderness survival principles. It was also exactly what the bear was expecting him to do. Alan spent the evening hours fortifying the main research building. He blocked the damaged door with a heavy desk, secured the windows, and gathered all available food into a single location that he could defend if necessary. The building's thick log walls would provide substantial protection, and the generator ensured he would have light and heat throughout the night. As darkness fell across Kodiak Island, Alan settled into the main room with his emergency pack and the station's remaining supplies. Outside, the temperature was dropping rapidly, and the wind was beginning to pick up. Weather reports he had reviewed before his flight indicated a storm system approaching from the Gulf of Alaska, but it wasn't expected to arrive until the following afternoon. Alan tried to remain optimistic about his situation. Professional search and rescue teams would begin looking for him at first light, and his PLB signal would guide them directly to his location. The bear that had damaged the research station was probably miles away by now, following its instincts to avoid areas of human activity. By tomorrow evening, he would be safe in Kodiak, telling his story to investigators and planning the recovery of his aircraft. At 11:47 p.m., Alan heard the first scratching sounds outside the building. The noise was soft at first, like branches scraping against the log walls in the wind. But the sounds were too rhythmic, too purposeful to be natural. Something was moving around the perimeter of the building, testing the structure, looking for weaknesses. Alan reached for his bear spray and moved to the window facing the main clearing. The generator provided enough light to illuminate the immediate area around the buildings, but beyond that circle of safety, the forest was pitch black. He could see nothing, but the scratching sounds continued, moving from the north wall to the east wall to the south wall in a slow, deliberate pattern. For 30 minutes, the sounds continued as something circled the building repeatedly. Alan remained motionless at the window, his finger on the trigger of the bear spray, his heart hammering against his ribs. The logical part of his mind insisted that bears were not capable of the kind of strategic thinking this behavior suggested, but another part, the primitive part that had kept his ancestors alive for millions of years, understood that he was being hunted. At 12:18 a.m., the scratching stopped. Alan waited for another 20 minutes, listening to the silence and wondering if his imagination had amplified normal forest sounds into something sinister. Gradually, his breathing returned to normal, and his grip on the bear spray relaxed. Whatever had been outside was gone now, and he could try to get some rest before the rescue teams arrived. He was turning away from the window when massive claws punched through the glass 3 inches from his face. Alan threw himself backward as the window exploded inward, glass fragments showering the floor as enormous paws reached through the opening. He could see nothing beyond the window except darkness, but the sound of the animal's breathing, deep, deliberate, predatory, filled the room. The paws withdrew, and for a moment Alan hoped the bear would simply leave. Then the building shook as something massive threw itself against the north wall. The entire structure groaned under the impact, and Alan heard the sound of logs shifting in their foundations. A second impact followed, then a third. The bear was systematically testing the building's structural integrity, looking for the weakest point that would allow it entry. Each blow sent vibrations through the floor, and Alan could hear equipment falling from shelves in the adjacent rooms. Panic threatened to overwhelm Alan's rational thinking, but his survival training asserted itself. He needed to get to higher ground, away from the bear's reach. The research station's main building included a loft area that housed additional sleeping quarters and storage space. If he could reach the loft, he might be able to defend himself until daylight drove the bear away. Alan grabbed his emergency pack and headed for the ladder leading to the loft, just as the bear found the building's weak point. The door he had blocked with the desk was solid, but the frame had been damaged during the bear's previous visit to the station. Under sustained assault, the frame began to separate from the wall. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the building as Alan climbed toward the loft. Behind him, he could hear the desk being pushed aside as the bear forced its way through the damaged doorway. The animal was inside now, and Alan could hear it moving through the main room, investigating this new environment with the methodical thoroughness of an apex predator. From the loft, Alan could look down into the main room through gaps between the floorboards. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The bear was enormous, larger than any animal he had ever seen. Its shoulders reached nearly 4 feet off the ground, and its head was the size of a beer keg. The animal's winter coat was thick and dark, almost black in the artificial light from the generator. But it was the bear's behavior that terrified Alan most. The animal was not acting like a normal bear. It was not foraging randomly or investigating the building out of curiosity. It was hunting, methodically searching for prey it knew was nearby. The bear moved through the main room with deliberate precision, its massive head swinging back and forth as it analyzed scents and sounds. When it reached the base of the ladder leading to the loft, it paused and looked up directly at Alan's hiding place. For 30 seconds, man and beast stared at each other through the gaps in the floorboards. Alan held his breath, afraid that any movement would trigger an attack. The bear's eyes reflected the artificial light like amber coins, and Alan could see intelligence there, not the simple instinct-driven behavior of a normal predator, but something more complex and infinitely more frightening. The bear began to climb. The ladder was designed for human use, but the animal's immense strength allowed it to ascend despite its size. Each step sent vibrations through the entire loft structure, and Alan could hear the wooden rungs creaking under the tremendous weight. The bear was coming for him, and there was nowhere left to run. Alan positioned himself at the far end of the loft, bear spray ready, and waited for the inevitable confrontation. His mind raced through his limited options. The loft had a small window that might provide an escape route, but it was a 15-foot drop to the ground outside. Even if he survived the fall, he would be defenseless in the open forest, with an enraged bear in pursuit. The bear's massive head appeared at the top of the ladder, followed by shoulders that seemed impossibly broad in the confined space. The animal pulled itself into the loft with surprising grace, its claws finding purchase on the wooden floorboards. At this distance, Alan could smell the bear, a musky, wild scent, mixed with something else, something that reminded him of the metallic odor of blood. "Stay back!" Alan shouted, raising the bear spray. "Stay back!" And the bear paused, tilting its head as if considering Alan's words. For a moment, hope flickered in Alan's chest. The animal might be deterred by human voice and presence, might retreat back down the ladder and leave the building. Instead, the bear began to advance. Alan triggered the bear spray when the animal was still 8 feet away, sending a stream of concentrated pepper solution directly at the bear's face. The chemical cloud filled the loft area, and Alan immediately began coughing and gasping as the irritant affected his own eyes and respiratory system. The bear barely reacted to the spray that should have sent it fleeing in agony. It shook its massive head once, sneezed, and continued advancing with the same methodical determination it had shown throughout the night. Alan backed against the loft window, his bear spray exhausted and his options eliminated. The bear was 5 feet away now, close enough that he could see the details of its face, the small eyes, the powerful jaw, the teeth that could crush bone as easily as breaking kindling. This was how Alan Brooks was going to die. Alone in the Alaskan wilderness, miles from help, killed by a predator that seemed to have specifically targeted him for reasons he could not understand. His children would never know what happened to him. His ex-wife would receive a phone call telling her that Alan's aircraft had been found crashed, but that his body had never been recovered. The bear reached out with one massive paw, its claws extended, and Alan closed his eyes and waited for the end. The sound that saved his life came from outside the building, the deep, rhythmic beating of helicopter rotors cutting through the winter air. The bear froze, its head turning toward the sound. For the first time since the confrontation began, the animal showed uncertainty. The helicopter sound grew louder, accompanied by the brilliant white glare of searchlights sweeping across the forest. "Down here!" Alan screamed, though he knew his voice could not possibly carry over the noise of the helicopter. "I'm in here!" The bear retreated to the ladder, its attention now focused entirely on the aircraft circling overhead. Alan could hear voices shouting outside the building, followed by the sound of heavy boots on the wooden steps leading to the main entrance. "Alaska State Troopers! Is anyone in the building?" "Here!" Alan called back. "I'm in the loft. There's a bear in here with me." The response was immediate and professional. "Sir, we're going to provide covering fire while you exit the building. When I give the signal, come down that ladder as fast as you can and head straight for the door." Alan heard the distinctive sound of rifle bolts being cycled, followed by several warning shots fired into the air. The bear, now thoroughly confused by the noise and commotion, retreated down the ladder and headed for the damaged doorway. "Now! Move now!" Alan dropped down the ladder and sprinted for the exit, emerging from the building into a scene of controlled chaos. 2 Alaska State Trooper helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights turning night into day. On the ground, a team of 4 troopers in Arctic gear maintained a defensive perimeter around the building, while emergency medical personnel waited to evaluate Alan's condition. "Are you injured?" asked the team leader, a veteran trooper named Sergeant Jim Morrison, who had participated in hundreds of wilderness rescues over his 20-year career. "No," Alan replied, his voice shaking with relief and residual terror. "I'm okay, but there are 3 researchers missing from this station, Dr. Sarah Chen, Dr. Marcus Webb, and a graduate student named Jennifer Kowalski. They were supposed to be here, but the place was destroyed when I arrived." Sergeant Morrison's expression darkened. "When did you last have contact with the research team?" 2 weeks ago, when I made my previous supply run. They were supposed to be here through the end of February. The search for the missing researchers began immediately, even as the rescue team secured Alan's safety. Emergency medical technician Patricia Valdez, a 34-year-old EMT with extensive wilderness rescue experience, conducted a rapid trauma assessment while other team members established a defensive perimeter around the research station. "You're suffering from mild hypothermia and probably some shock," Valdez told Alan as she wrapped him in thermal blankets. "We need to get you to a medical facility for a complete evaluation, but you're in remarkably good condition considering what you've been through." The helicopter evacuation to Kodiak Island Hospital took 18 minutes, during which Alan provided a detailed account of his crash, his discovery of the destroyed research station, and his night-long confrontation with the massive bear. The rescue team listened with growing concern, recognizing that they were dealing with something far more serious than a routine aircraft emergency. Dr. Amanda Foster, Kodiak Island Hospital's emergency department physician, had treated numerous wilderness trauma cases during her 8 years in Alaska, but Alan's story presented unique challenges. While his physical injuries were minor, cuts, bruises, and mild hypothermia, His psychological state showed clear signs of severe trauma. "You've experienced something that would terrify anyone," Dr. Foster explained as she completed her examination. "The combination of the crash, the isolation, and the bear encounter has created a perfect storm of psychological stress. I'm going to recommend that you speak with our trauma counselor before you're discharged." The trauma counselor, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, was a 45-year-old clinical psychologist who specialized in treating survivors of wilderness emergencies. Her practice had expanded significantly in recent years as climate change and increased outdoor recreation had led to more frequent human-wildlife conflicts throughout Alaska. "What you experienced last night represents one of the most dangerous wildlife encounters documented in Alaska in recent years," Dr. Martinez told Alan during their session. "The fact that you survived demonstrates remarkable courage and resourcefulness, but it's important to understand that recovery from this kind of trauma takes time." While Alan was receiving medical care in Kodiak, the search for the missing researchers intensified. Alaska State Troopers coordinated with the National Guard, the Coast Guard, and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game to mount the largest wilderness search operation in the region's history. The effort involved 6 helicopters, 2 fixed-wing aircraft, and over 40 personnel trained in wilderness rescue and wildlife management. The search team's first discovery came at 10:30 a.m. on February 9th, when Trooper pilot Sarah McKinney spotted the wreckage of Alan's Cessna from her helicopter. The aircraft had broken apart more severely than Alan remembered, with debris scattered over a 200-yard area. The crash site showed clear signs of bear activity, with claw marks on the aircraft's aluminum skin and tracks throughout the surrounding area. The bear had been investigating the crash site repeatedly. Reported wildlife biologist Dr. Kyle Anderson, who was part of the search team. "We found tracks from at least 3 different visits, suggesting the animal was monitoring the area for signs of human activity." The search team's investigation of Base Camp Ursus revealed evidence of a sustained bear attack that had apparently lasted several hours. The damage to the buildings was far more extensive than what a normal foraging bear would cause, suggesting that the animal had been attempting to access something specific inside the structures. Most disturbing was the complete absence of the research team. Their personal belongings remained scattered throughout the compound, their research data was intact on undamaged computer systems, and their vehicle was still parked beside the main building. But there were no signs of struggle, no blood evidence, and no indication of what had happened to 3 experienced researchers who understood wilderness safety protocols better than most people. The search expanded to include a 5-mile radius around the research station, with teams following every trail, checking every possible shelter, and investigating every anomaly in the landscape that might provide clues to the researchers' fate. Bloodhounds were brought in from Anchorage to assist with the search, and thermal imaging equipment was used to scan areas that were inaccessible to ground teams. On the morning of February 10th, the search teams made their first significant discovery. Trooper Dave Martinez was investigating a game trail approximately 2 miles north of the research station when he found Dr. Sarah Chen's GPS collar tracking equipment. The sophisticated electronic device, worth over $3,000, had been carefully removed from its protective case and placed in the middle of the trail, as if deliberately positioned to be found. "This doesn't make sense," Martinez reported to the command post. "The equipment shows no signs of damage, and it's been placed here intentionally." Dr. Chen wouldn't have abandoned this equipment voluntarily. It's essential to her research. The discovery of the GPS equipment led to an intensive search of the surrounding area, and within hours, the teams found additional items belonging to the missing researchers. Dr. Webb's field notebook was discovered under a large spruce tree. Its pages filled with detailed observations about bear behavior patterns dating up to February 7th, the day before Alan's crash. The final entry in Dr. Webb's notebook would later become central to the investigation into the researcher's disappearance. February 7th, 6:30 p.m. Unusual activity from bear number 23, the large male we tagged last September. The animal has been circling the station for the past 3 hours, showing none of the avoidance behavior typical of tagged bears. Sarah thinks we should consider evacuation if the behavior continues. The bear's movements suggest predatory stalking rather than territorial defense. This is unprecedented in our data. Jennifer Kowalski's camera bag was found the following day, containing digital photographs that provided crucial insights into the researcher's final hours. The images showed the massive bear that Alan had encountered, but they revealed something that chilled the search teams to their cores. The photographs documented the bear's methodical approach to the research station over a period of several days. The animal had been observing the compound, learning the researchers' routines, and waiting for the optimal moment to attack. The final photographs in the sequence showed the bear beginning its assault on the buildings while the researchers huddled inside, apparently aware of their desperate situation but unable to call for help. The search for the missing researchers continued for 2 more weeks, involving over 200 personnel and resources valued at more than $500,000. Despite the extensive effort, no trace of Dr. Chen, Dr. Webb, or Jennifer Kowalski was ever found. The official investigation concluded that the 3 researchers had been killed by the bear, but the lack of physical evidence left many questions unanswered. Alaska Department of Fish and Game officials launched a parallel investigation into the bear's behavior, recognizing that the animal posed an unprecedented threat to human safety in the region. Dr. Kyle Anderson led a team of wildlife biologists in analyzing the bear's movement patterns and territorial behavior, hoping to predict where it might appear next. This bear is demonstrating learned behavior that we've never documented before, Dr. Anderson explained to state officials. It has apparently learned to associate human presence with food sources, and it's showing planning and patience that suggest higher cognitive function than we typically see in brown bears. The bear, designated as bear number 23 in the research station's tracking system, was a 15-year-old male weighing an estimated 1,400 pounds. GPS collar data showed that the animal had claimed a territory encompassing nearly 50 square miles of southern Kodiak Island, making it one of the dominant predators in the region. More troubling was evidence that bear number 23 was not acting alone. Tracking data from other collared bears in the area showed unusual movement patterns in the weeks following the researcher's disappearance, suggesting that the animal's aggressive behavior was influencing other bears in the region. The decision to hunt bear number 23 was made by Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy on February 28th, following consultation with wildlife management experts and public safety officials. The bear's demonstrated ability to target humans made it an unacceptable threat to public safety, regardless of its protected status as part of the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge. The hunt for bear number 23 lasted 6 days and involved professional hunters, wildlife biologists, and state troopers working in coordinated teams. The bear's intelligence and territorial knowledge made it a formidable adversary, and several attempted encounters resulted in the animal evading capture through what appeared to be deliberate misdirection. On March 6th, bear number 23 was finally located and killed by professional hunter Jake Sullivan near the abandoned village of Karluk, approximately 20 miles from the research station. The animal's death was confirmed through GPS collar data and DNA analysis of tissue samples. The necropsy of bear number 23 revealed findings that shocked wildlife experts throughout Alaska. The bear's stomach contents included fragments of synthetic fabric, pieces of electronic equipment, and human hair that DNA analysis matched to the missing researchers. More disturbing was evidence of systematic tool use. The bear had apparently learned to manipulate metal objects as weapons and had modified its claws through deliberate abrasion against rocks. This animal had crossed the line from predator to something else entirely, Dr. Anderson reported to state officials. The evidence suggests cognitive abilities and learned behaviors that challenge our fundamental understanding of brown bear intelligence. Alan Brooks returned to flying 3 months after his ordeal, but the experience had fundamentally changed his relationship with the Alaskan wilderness. He completed his commercial pilot medical certification and psychological evaluation in May 2024, but he never again flew solo missions to remote locations without comprehensive backup communications and emergency support systems. The trauma counseling sessions with Dr. Martinez continued for nearly 6 months, addressing not only the terror of his bear encounter, but also his survivor's guilt over the researcher's fate. Alan struggled with the knowledge that his crash had potentially triggered the sequence of events that led to their deaths, though investigators repeatedly assured him that the bear's behavior predated his arrival in the area. The bear was already hunting the research team, Dr. Martinez explained during one of their sessions. Your crash was a coincidence that probably saved your life by providing you with emergency equipment and training that the researchers didn't have access to. The investigation into the incident produced a comprehensive report that became required reading for wilderness researchers throughout Alaska. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game implemented new safety protocols for remote research stations, including mandatory backup communication systems, emergency shelters designed to withstand bear attacks, and requirements for armed security personnel at isolated facilities. Dr. Sarah Chen's research on Kodiak bear behavior became the foundation for ongoing studies into climate change-induced modifications in predator behavior. Her data, recovered from undamaged computer systems at the research station, provided crucial insights into how environmental stresses were creating more aggressive and intelligent predators throughout the Arctic region. The families of the missing researchers struggled with the lack of closure provided by the investigation. Dr. Chen's parents, retired professors from the University of California, Berkeley, established a scholarship fund in their daughter's name to support graduate students pursuing wildlife research. Dr. Webb's sister, a high school teacher in Portland, Oregon, became an advocate for improved safety protocols for wilderness researchers. Jennifer Kowalski's parents faced the additional burden of their daughter's incomplete graduate studies. The University of Alaska Anchorage granted Jennifer a posthumous master's degree based on her work at the research station, recognizing her contributions to understanding bear behavior and her dedication to wildlife conservation. The broader implications of the incident extended far beyond Alaska's borders. Wildlife management agencies throughout North America began reassessing their protocols for human-wildlife interactions, recognizing that climate change was creating new categories of dangerous encounters that existing safety measures could not address. The media coverage of the incident sparked national debates about wilderness preservation, human encroachment on wildlife habitats, and the responsibilities of government agencies to protect both researchers and wildlife populations. Environmental groups argued that the incident demonstrated the need for expanded protected areas and reduced human presence in critical wildlife habitats. Hunting organizations took a different perspective, arguing that the incident proved the need for more aggressive wildlife management and increased hunting opportunities to control predator populations. The debate became particularly heated in Alaska, where subsistence hunting and wildlife tourism represented significant economic interests. Alan Brooks found himself at the center of these debates, reluctantly becoming a public figure as the sole survivor of what media outlets termed the Kodiak Massacre. He testified before congressional committees investigating wildlife management policies and spoke at conferences addressing wilderness safety protocols. "I don't consider myself a hero," Alan told a congressional hearing in September 2024. "I was lucky, nothing more. The real heroes were Dr. Chen, Dr. Webb, and Jennifer Kowalski, who dedicated their lives to understanding and protecting these animals. Their deaths were a tragedy that should never be repeated. The psychological impact of the incident extended beyond the immediate survivors and families involved. Wilderness guides, researchers, and outdoor enthusiasts throughout Alaska reported increased anxiety about bear encounters, leading to reduced participation in outdoor activities and negative economic impacts on tourism-dependent communities. Dr. Rebecca Martinez found herself treating an increasing number of patients suffering from what she termed secondary trauma, psychological distress experienced by people who had not directly experienced bear encounters but who identified strongly with the victims. Her practice expanded to include specialized group therapy sessions for wilderness professionals dealing with fear and anxiety about their work environments. The research station itself was rebuilt in the summer of 2024, incorporating new safety features designed to prevent similar tragedies. The new facility included reinforced construction capable of withstanding bear attacks, underground emergency shelters, satellite communication systems that could not be damaged by wildlife, and automated distress beacons that would activate if human presence was not detected for specified periods. Dr. Kyle Anderson was appointed to lead the new research program, focusing specifically on understanding and preventing aggressive bear behavior. His team included specialists in animal psychology, environmental stress factors, and human-wildlife conflict resolution. The research program represented a fundamental shift from purely observational studies to active intervention in managing predator behavior. The first year of operation at the rebuilt research station passed without major incidents, though several encounters with curious bears tested the effectiveness of the new safety protocols. The research team reported that local bear populations appeared to be returning to normal behavior patterns following the removal of bear number 23, supporting theories that the aggressive animal had been influencing other bears in the region. Alan Brooks married Dr. Rebecca Martinez in November 2024, finding love and healing in their shared understanding of trauma and recovery. The wedding took place in Anchorage, attended by fellow pilots, medical professionals, and survivors of other wilderness emergencies who had formed a close-knit community of mutual support. The couple purchased a small home in Kodiak, where Alan continued his flying career with enhanced safety protocols, and Rebecca expanded her trauma counseling practice to serve the growing community of wilderness professionals dealing with psychological challenges. Their relationship represented a form of healing that transcended the individual trauma they had both experienced. In December 2024, nearly a year after the incident, Alan made his first flight back to the rebuilt research station. The flight was carefully planned, with backup aircraft, comprehensive communication systems, and emergency support teams standing by. Dr. Anderson and his research team welcomed Alan warmly, recognizing his unique connection to their work and his role in the events that had shaped their understanding of bear behavior. Standing in the clearing where Base Camp Ursus had been destroyed, Alan felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the researchers who had died, gratitude for his own survival, and determination to ensure that their sacrifice had contributed to preventing future tragedies. The forest around the station showed signs of normal wildlife activity, with tracks from deer, smaller bears, and various other animals that posed no threat to human visitors. "The forest has returned to what it should be," Dr. Anderson told Alan as they toured the rebuilt facility. "We're seeing natural predator-prey relationships, appropriate territorial behaviors, and normal seasonal migration patterns. Bear number 23 was an aberration, a dangerous anomaly that represented what happens when environmental stresses push wildlife beyond their normal behavioral boundaries." The investigation's final report, published in March 2025, concluded that the incident represented a convergence of environmental factors, human presence, and individual animal psychology that created a perfect storm of dangerous conditions. Climate change had reduced traditional food sources, forcing bears to expand their territories and modify their hunting behaviors. The presence of the research station had provided an opportunity for one particularly intelligent bear to learn that humans could be targeted as prey. The report's recommendations included expanded monitoring of bear behavior throughout Alaska, mandatory safety protocols for all wilderness research facilities, increased funding for wildlife management programs, and enhanced training for anyone working in remote locations where dangerous wildlife encounters were possible. Alan Brooks became an advocate for wilderness safety education, speaking at conferences and training sessions for pilots, researchers, and outdoor professionals throughout Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. His presentations combined technical information about aviation safety with practical advice about surviving wildlife encounters and managing the psychological aftermath of traumatic events. "The wilderness is not our enemy," Alan would tell his audiences, "but it demands respect, preparation, and humility. The moment we become complacent is the moment we put ourselves and others at risk." Dr. Chen, Dr. Webb, and Jennifer understood this better than anyone, and their deaths remind us that even the most prepared and experienced people can encounter situations beyond their control. The families of the missing researchers found different ways to honor their memories and cope with their losses. Dr. Chen's parents endowed a research chair at the University of Alaska Anchorage, dedicated to studying human-wildlife interactions and developing improved safety protocols for field researchers. The position was filled by Dr. Kyle Anderson in recognition of his leadership in reforming wilderness research practices. Dr. Webb's sister established a foundation providing emergency communication equipment to researchers working in remote locations throughout North America. The Foundation's first initiative equipped 50 research stations with satellite communication systems capable of functioning even when damaged by wildlife or weather, potentially preventing future tragedies like the one that claimed her brother's life. Jennifer Kowalski's parents created a scholarship program supporting undergraduate students from rural Alaska communities who wanted to pursue careers in wildlife biology and conservation. The program recognized Jennifer's passion for making scientific research accessible to communities most directly affected by human-wildlife conflicts. The annual memorial service held each February 8th at the University of Alaska Anchorage became a focal point for the Alaska scientific community's ongoing commitment to wilderness research and safety. The service honored not only the 3 researchers who died at Base Camp Ursus, but all the scientists, pilots, guides, and other professionals who risked their lives to advance human understanding of Alaska's wilderness. Alan Brooks attended every memorial service, recognizing his role as a living connection to the events that had claimed 3 lives and fundamentally changed Alaska's approach to wilderness research. His presence served as a reminder that survival often depended on chance as much as preparation, and that honoring the dead required dedication to preventing similar tragedies in the future. The rebuilt research station continued its work throughout 2025, contributing valuable data to the growing body of knowledge about climate change impacts on Arctic wildlife populations. The research team's findings supported theories that environmental stresses were creating new categories of human-wildlife conflicts that would require innovative management approaches and enhanced safety protocols. Dr. Anderson's team documented significant changes in bear behavior patterns throughout the Kodiak Island region, with animals showing increased territorial aggression, modified seasonal migration patterns, and altered relationships with traditional food sources. The data provided crucial insights for wildlife management agencies throughout North America, dealing with similar challenges in other regions affected by rapid environmental change. The incident at Base Camp Ursus became a case study taught in wilderness safety courses, wildlife management programs, and emergency response training throughout North America. The detailed documentation of events, from Allen's initial crash through the comprehensive search and rescue operation, provided valuable lessons for professionals working in remote locations where similar emergencies might occur. Aviation safety instructors incorporated Allen's experience into training programs for bush pilots, emphasizing the importance of comprehensive emergency equipment, backup communication systems, and survival skills that extended beyond basic aircraft operation. His story became a standard component of wilderness flying certification programs throughout Alaska and Canada. Wildlife biologists studied the incident for insights into the cognitive capabilities of large predators and the environmental factors that could trigger aberrant behavior in normally predictable species. The research contributed to developing new theories about animal intelligence, learned behavior, and the impact of human presence on wildlife psychology. Emergency medical personnel analyzed the rescue operations' response times, communication protocols, and medical treatment procedures to identify areas for improvement in future wilderness emergencies. The lessons learned from the incident led to enhanced training programs for emergency responders working in remote locations and improved coordination between different agencies involved in wilderness rescue operations. The legal implications of the incident extended through the courts for over 2 years, as insurance companies, government agencies, and research institutions worked to determine liability and compensation for the losses incurred. Allen's survival meant that he could provide detailed testimony about the events, but the absence of the other victims complicated efforts to establish a complete understanding of what had occurred. The families of the missing researchers filed wrongful death lawsuits against multiple parties, arguing that inadequate safety protocols, insufficient emergency communication systems, and poor coordination between research institutions and wildlife management agencies had contributed to the tragedy. The legal proceedings ultimately resulted in settlements totaling over $3 million and significant changes in how wilderness research was conducted throughout Alaska. Insurance companies began requiring enhanced safety protocols and emergency preparedness systems for any policies covering wilderness research activities. The new requirements included mandatory backup communication systems, armed security personnel for remote locations, and comprehensive emergency response plans that had been tested and validated by professional rescue organizations. Research institutions throughout North America implemented new policies requiring extensive safety training for any personnel working in remote locations, comprehensive risk assessments for all field research projects, and mandatory psychological evaluations for researchers who had experienced traumatic events during their work. The incident's impact on Alaska's tourism industry was significant but temporary. Initial media coverage of the Kodiak massacre led to cancellations of wilderness tours and reduced bookings for fishing and hunting expeditions throughout the region. However, enhanced safety protocols and increased awareness of wildlife management issues actually improved long-term safety for outdoor recreational activities. Tourism operators invested heavily in improved safety equipment, enhanced guide training, and better coordination with wildlife management agencies to prevent human-bear conflicts. The result was a more professional and safer outdoor recreation industry that could provide visitors with wilderness experiences while minimizing the risk of dangerous encounters. The documentary film When the Sky Falls Silent, released in late 2025, brought national attention to the incident and its broader implications for wilderness conservation and human-wildlife relationships. The film featured interviews with Alan Brooks, family members of the missing researchers, rescue personnel, and wildlife experts who provided context for understanding the complex factors that had contributed to the tragedy. The documentary sparked renewed public interest in Alaska wilderness conservation and provided funding for continued research into human-wildlife conflict prevention. It also raised awareness of the psychological challenges faced by wilderness professionals and the importance of mental health support for people working in high-risk environments. Alan Brooks's story became an inspiration for other trauma survivors, demonstrating that recovery was possible even from the most terrifying experiences. His marriage to Dr. Martinez, his return to flying, and his advocacy work showed that traumatic events could be transformed into positive contributions to public safety and awareness. The couple's joint presentations at trauma recovery conferences throughout North America provided hope and practical advice for survivors of wildlife attacks, aviation accidents, and other wilderness emergencies. Their message emphasized that healing required time, professional support, and a commitment to helping others avoid similar experiences. As 2025 drew to a close, the rebuilt research station had become a model for safe wilderness research facilities throughout the Arctic region. International delegations of scientists, safety experts, and government officials visited the facility to study its innovative safety features and learn from the tragic events that had necessitated its reconstruction. The station's research findings contributed to global efforts to understand and manage the impacts of climate change on predator behavior, providing data that informed wildlife management policies in Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. The work continued the legacy of Dr. Chen, Dr. Webb, and Jennifer Kowalski, ensuring that their deaths had contributed to advancing human understanding of wilderness conservation. Alan Brooks continued flying throughout Alaska, but he never forgot the lessons learned during his nightmarish encounter with bear number 23. Every flight included comprehensive safety equipment, backup communication systems, and detailed emergency procedures that reflected his understanding of how quickly routine operations could become life-or-death situations. His logbook entry for December 31st, 2025, nearly 2 years after the incident, reflected his ongoing commitment to safety and his gratitude for survival. Another year of safe flying completed. Weather clear, aircraft performing well, passengers delivered safely to their destinations, thinking of Sarah, Marcus, and Jennifer as always. Their sacrifice continues to guide every decision I make in the cockpit and in life. The entry represented more than a routine log notation. It was a promise to honor the memory of 3 dedicated researchers whose deaths had taught valuable lessons about the delicate balance between human ambition and natural forces in one of the world's last true wildernesses. The Alaska wilderness remained beautiful, dangerous, and essential to understanding humanity's relationship with the natural world. The incident at Base Camp Ursus had claimed 3 lives and traumatized everyone involved, but it had also contributed to making future wilderness research safer and more responsible. Bear number 23 was gone, but the forces that had created its aberrant behavior climate change, habitat disruption, and human encroachment on traditional wildlife territories, continued to challenge wildlife managers and researchers throughout the Arctic. The lessons learned from one terrifying encounter in the Kodiak wilderness would continue to inform human-wildlife relationships for generations to come. In the end, Alan Brooks's survival represented both a triumph of human resourcefulness and a sobering reminder of nature's power to humble even the most experienced and prepared individuals. His story became a testament to the courage of wilderness researchers, the dedication of rescue personnel, and the resilience of trauma survivors who refused to let fear prevent them from continuing their important work. The forest around Base Camp Ursus returned to its natural rhythms, but the memory of what had occurred there served as a permanent reminder that the wilderness demanded respect, preparation, and humility from anyone who ventured into its domain. The price of complacency could be measured in human lives, and the responsibility for preventing future tragedies rested with everyone who chose to work in Alaska's magnificent and unforgiving wilderness.